Must be the TV delay. Good evening and welcome to the Board of Selectmen's meeting for Monday, October 15th. Our chairman, Mr. Paul Glavely, is not feeling well tonight and won't be with us. On the agenda tonight, we have organization at 6:30. 6:35, we go by town departments. A, patrol officer appointment. B, highway with plowing and sanding of private ways. C, the highway again with transfer station update on different hauling things that are going on. D, Veterans Heritage Grant Letter of Intent for Veterans Corner Memorial. 7 o'clock, special town meeting, review the articles. Littleton Common Smart Sewer Design, 2019 budget amendments, and B, assignment of articles. 7:30 input, members updates, followed by town administrator search update and interim town administrator. We'll be talking about that. Followed by number 6, scheduled public meeting with Mass DOT, 25% design for Air Road and Bruce Street, Willow Road intersection. 8:20, town administrator, assistant town administrator in different departments. A, Housing Choice Communities Capital Grant Date. B, Community Compact Cabinet Grant Opportunities. C, Consolidation Collective Bargaining Agreements for Highway, Littleton Dispatch, Littleton Police. Then minutes and executive session at 8:50. Madam Secretary, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Keith, do you have a mail?
Okay, sure, Mr. Chairman, just a few items in the mail. One is, it's in the form of a graphic, a map, and it's from the Electric Light Department showing a proposed location of 2 electric vehicle charging station right out in front of this building, at the entrance closest to Shattuck Street near the front of the library. And I don't know if I will see if I can zoom in. And you can see in the center, there would be one charging station that would serve those first 2 spaces right there. And that's offered to us by the general manager, Nick Lawler, who contacted, and they got a good price, and they want to offer that for installation here, which is great because we've had requests over the years for electric vehicle charging station that the electric light has not been able to accommodate, so we're happy to have this accommodation made. This is a flyer that we received about a workshop on how to get more affordable housing built. It's sponsored by the 5-town group that Littleton is a part of for regional housing services, and it's going to be a workshop over at the Devon's Enterprise Commission office at lunchtime on Thursday this week.
Lunch is provided.
And
I'm good.
And then this was a flyer of interest, a couple of familiar names anyway, that this is a workshop on careers in local government. How about that? And on October 18th, this Thursday, at Suffolk Law School, it's part of it's sponsored by the Suffolk University student chapter of the ICMA, the International City Management Association, and then they've invited both Anthony and myself to be on that panel. So, that I think is all I had in the packet. Lots more in the rest of the agenda.
Okay, moving right around along. 2A, Chief appointment of Reserve Officer Ryan Richard.
Good evening. This is, I bring forward tonight Ryan Richards. Ryan is a reserve officer with us at this point in time. He's been with us just about a year as a reserve. Ryan is part of that Fitchburg State 4+1 program that many of you have talked about before in regards to it. We have 2 openings right now for full-time patrol to bring us back to level staffing. Out of the 2, Ryan has come to the top so far. The second candidate's background investigation is not done and complete, so I could not bring that second candidate forward. Ryan's a homegrown boy from Shirley, went to Air High School, graduated, went on to Fitchburg State. His mom and dad, Mark and Sandy, are here tonight to watch him getting pointed in front of you. Ryan knows that he's going to be grilled with millions of questions from you tonight, so I'm sure he's on his best.
He says he hasn't been here before.
So I give you Ryan Richard.
Congratulations.
Thank you, sir.
You look a lot better today than I saw you down at the open house when you were around that.
Well worth it.
For people who didn't know it, they had the dog officer down there showing people exactly some of the things they go through, and our officer was kind enough to dress up in one of those uniforms and get bitten by the dog.
We have a little bit of war wound from that, don't we?
That's all. Start up.
Well, it's nice to see you back, and congratulations. I know you've gone through the process, and we'll just go through. I don't know whether we have questions. I'll open up to the board since of.
You
Anyone?
want to start with your question? I don't have questions. I just want to say congratulations and welcome aboard, and it's nice to see you again. I saw you at the open house as well, running for your life. So it's nice to see you survived and you're in one piece, but happy to have you on board.
Thank you, ma'am.
So I do have a question for you, but it's more about the 4+1 program to help sort of inform the public about what that is and why that's, I guess, why we found a lot of really great candidates. So could you tell us a little bit about the 4+1 program
Yes, sir.
and your experience with it?
So the 4+1 program pretty much is the first 4 years is you study criminal justice and you get your bachelor's in criminal justice. But during those 4 years, you have to dress up in khakis, boots, and a shirt that makes you look like you're uniformed and in line and stuff. And then you hit the academy in between your master's year and your bachelor's year. So I graduated 3 days later. I was in the academy, did that for 4 months, and then right now, currently in the process of getting my master's.
And can you tell me a little bit about what you're studying at the master's level now? A couple of representative courses or topics?
Well, right now, I'm only taking 3 classes right now, but it is pretty tough. But right now, we're mostly focusing on program evaluation and like where statistics are coming from in policing. So my master's will be in policing, so we're just, getting the foundation of where and why our jobs are progressing and digressing.
Interesting. Thank you.
You're welcome, sir.
I just wanted to make him sweat a little bit. It'll be good to have you on our team, because I know that going to Shirley High School and running to, I have 4 boys and a daughter, and my boys have run into the Richard boys in sports. And the one question I have for you, there was a zone defense that your mother used to play. I could never break it. No, I think it's great to have you on board. You've shown your dedication to the community, and we appreciate that. I've seen you at high school football games and just around town. Wasn't able to make the open house, but it sounded like you made a splash. But wish you all the best and a safe and long career with us.
Thank you, sir.
And one of the points, Chase, that we're gonna try to do too is, we've told Ryan that we're willing to work with him so he can finish off the master's program and how we're gonna go forward with scheduling for his training and whatnot, so.
I hope it was clear. I was joking when you said only 3. Between juggling all the other things, it looks like you got going. Only 3 was perhaps a bit low.
Does this smell? So look for a motion.
Sure. Move that the Board of Selectmen vote to promote Reserve Police Officer Ryan Richard to the position of permanent full-time patrol officer for the Littleton Police Department.
Second.
Been moved in second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Congratulations.
Thank you, sir.
Congratulations.
Thank you, sir.
You gotta shake everybody else.
Gino's gonna kiss you.
Community policing.
That's community policing at work.
Right? That is fast.
Mom and Dad, congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
2B with the highway, we're talking about plowing and sanding of private ways and see which roads are up to,
Before we jump on the highway, we're going to take a picture right now. Do you want to take a picture with Mr. Richard and, for the police department, or?
it's fine with me, you want to do it now or?
Well, we can let Chris do his thing, but maybe,
No, go ahead, because I think we have two things, so if you want to do it first.
PG, can you just maybe grab that phone? Chief? Yep, thanks. You okay with that?
Yeah, so we can sing some songs now.
Cindy, lead us in some.
Oh, you don't want me to mention the songs?
Thanks, Chief. Can we just grab a picture maybe with you and Ryan?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it's
The only reason we stepped up there was the director of FSU Academy wanted it for their Facebook page, so she wanted to.
awesome.
It's great. He's one of the first to get hired as a full-time cadet out of there. So
Oh, wow.
Well, that's great.
Wow.
You will just come right up front there, Ryan, and, okay, Joe?
We're gonna go around front, is
I
that
think
so?
so. It's a big day. Let's celebrate it, right?
Put the match in, you guys can.
All the purples?
All the purples.
I should have sent you an email saying.
Yeah, I didn't get the memo.
thank you.
You're going to shake everybody's hand.
Sorry to interrupt.
That's all right.
We should celebrate those moments.
The Kodak moment.
What's a Kodak?
What's Sears?
Oh, that, they're out now, huh?
That hurts.
Plowing and sanding of private ways. We go through this every single year, and Chris, you want to lead this, because some roads I see are up to par and some are
Yeah,
not.
so, and since we brought this to the board, there's been a couple other ones that Jim's gone back out and re-inspected, so. But basically, every year we come before you with a list of roads. One was taken off, I can't remember it off the top of my head, because it was sold that by the policy. There was only one house on it, it still changed ownership, so we're no longer gonna plow it. But, yeah, this is the roads, the ones at the top there are all set, and the ones below, like I said, I think there's one or two that have been, since this came to the board, been approved, so.
That moved from the second category of conditions
To the first.
to the first category.
Correct. But you can approve it as
Yeah,
is,
approve
because
as
it all
is,
says,
then they will,
Jim.
yeah. All of them will move from category 2 to
Correct.
category 1 as soon as they're.
Yeah, most of them are, and we've been contacted by most of the ones that haven't been done yet, saying that they're in the process of getting contractors out there to get them done, so.
Did we have any major problems?
No, mostly just potholes, tree branches hanging over. The Green Needles area had a substantial amount of tree, because we had that ice storm late, and we had a hard time plowing it, so. But little stuff mostly. Star Hill was actually completely repaved, the first part of it, so that helped. So, overall, we're good.
Any questions from the board?
No.
Trust the director.
Just one comment. I'm gonna recuse myself from this vote, this is my house, or my road is up there. Though I think could probably make an argument that it applies to enough people that I didn't need to do that. I think it makes sense to just recuse myself.
So we want to go through a motion?
Sure. Move that the Board of Selectmen vote pursuant to its August 28, 2000 policy on plowing, sanding private ways to approve the list of roads as recommended by the Highway Department report dated October 1st, 2018 as follows. Approved without further conditions, Barron Way, Countryside Road, Great Road, number 504 through 512, plowing only. Green Needles Road, back half. Hiddenwood Path, Oak Ridge Road, Rock Place, Silver Birch Lane, Whispering Pine Drive, and Wickham Avenue, number 139 to number 149. Approved subject to conditions set forth by the Highway Department, Cricket Lane, Deer Run Road, Green Needles Road, Neshoba Woodlands section, Omega Way, Robinwood Road, Star Hill, and Winged Cove Road.
Second.
It's been moved in second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? So it's 3 and 1 abstention.
Okay.
Okay, second part, transfer station update.
Okay, so this is kind of a two-piecer. The first one is, as I've been before you folks a few times, the mixed plastics at the transfer station is getting basically impossible to get rid of. Groton just called us and shut us off, so we had to explore different avenues. And so what we're here for is to request an amendment to the waste management contract to haul that mixed plastics to their material recovery facility in Billerica.
Any changes at the transfer station itself? Are you going to use a different container for
Yeah,
that plastic?
so what we're gonna end up doing is we have ordered signs, and we're gonna bring our electric sign board up there to notify everybody. We're gonna move our plastics onto one of our compactors. And what that'll allow us to do is, we should be able to only have to haul once a month, because right now we haul about once a week. And we should be able to get 4 times as much in the compactor. So the cost to haul it to Billerica is about 4 times more expensive than it is to haul to Groton, so it's kind of a net zero, so to speak. But obviously now we're paying for the cost to dispose of it at Billerica versus we were actually not having to pay anything at Groton. But Groton can't find anywhere to get rid of it. They're basically paying to have it hauled away now, so they've pretty much they have shut us off. They told us anymore. So like I said, we're gonna have signs up, letting everybody know where to go. It's gonna be just as simple. It's just gonna be the compactor right in front of where the plastics are disposed of now.
Now, when you say plastics, is it just plastic bottles, or can you put other plastics in there?
Basically, it's numbers 1 through 7, but the big thing is no plastic bags, no, believe it or not, it's clear containers that you get strawberries or raspberries in, those aren't recyclable. So they don't actually take those. So those are considered part of our waste. So we get a percentage, 5–10% of the load can be that waste product. If we go over that, then we actually pay a fairly heavy fine, or an assessed fine for them. So what we do is we'll have a big list, and we actually kind of do now. We have examples of what can and can't be thrown away, recycled. We'll have a bigger list, a bigger display kind of on the table to say what can and can't be thrown away or recycled. Because it's just in the best interest of the town to try to recycle as best we can. The more we have that higher waste percentage, the more we'll get penalized. So, I mean, our guys up there are really awesome, or excuse me, our guy and girl, Phyllis and Chris, they're awesome. They do a really good job of keeping the material clean. So, but
Any questions from the board?
The only thought that I have is, it might be an opportunity for a high school kid to do a project about recycling, because it's not just a problem for Lieutenant Groton.
absolutely, it's
It's
across the
huge.
country.
But they might be able to do some sort of display that they can
Yeah, that's a really good
to
idea.
educate the schools, because the kids go home and they say, oh, you can't throw that out, that's not recyclable. So I think we can reach down that far, and if, some kids can take a couple sheets of plywood and tack some the number
Yeah.
one, this is number 1, this is number 2,
Yeah.
and,
Yeah,
the
that
red
would,
circle with the line through it, this can't be recycled.
that would be a great idea. Yeah, anything would help, And frankly, if we get more of it out of that, get a little more capacity in the thing, maybe we go 5 days or 5 weeks. So yeah, that's a great thought.
I can help you facilitate that if,
Yeah, absolutely. We can talk offline.
okay.
And you did mention the 2 people that work, I want to give them a lot of credit for what they do. They answer a lot of questions, they take a lot of grief at different times, even when we set the rates, and we ended up stopping in June, and they would take the grief about not prorate, how come it's not prorated or whatever, and I hope people would have patience to realize that things like that are set by this board at public hearings, and
Yeah, absolutely.
and
It's
not
not-
just them.
They're just the worker. They don't, they try to explain it as best they can, and, when in doubt, they tend to talk to the DPW director, go down and talk to the highway department, so. They do an awesome job up there. Without them, it would be very tough to do.
I was there last weekend, and they were checking the stickers, and I don't know the gentleman from the highway department that was out front, but I heard a person yelling, and all he did was ask to show the sticker. He had bought a sticker, but hadn't put it on his windshield.
Yep.
And it's in my glove compartment, and I'm saying, these poor people take this all the time, so
Yeah.
I give them a lot of credit.
It's just an opportunity to reach out to the community and say, folks, you know, if you haven't gotten your sticker and you know, I have it at home, I haven't gotten to town hall, I don't have cash on me, I don't have a check on me, whatever, you know. At this point, we don't take plastic up at the transfer station. Don't take it out of them. They're doing their job. They're there to manage the waste and try to do it as efficiently as possible, and they do a great job at it, as you mentioned, Mr. Chairman. So if I hate to ask for this, but if there are any issues or concerns, please reach out to one of us or through the town administrator's office, and we'll get you those answers.
There's been a couple times that Chris has threatened to put my phone number in the front of the...
Yes, I second that motion.
Any further discussion?
No. Ready? Sure, move move that the vote to approve an amendment to the municipal hauling contract with Waste Management of Fitchburg, Mass, expiring September 30th, 2020, to include also hauling and disposal of mixed plastics, number 1 through number 7, to its Billerica Material Recovery Facility. 2, move that the Board of Selectmen...
Just do number 1 for now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Second.
Moved in second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, number 2.
Oh.
Tell us your story.
This is the fun one. Very rarely do I come to you with good news. So, as you know, we had to assign a number based on what we were hearing from the industry.
Oh,
The bulky furniture was going up. We were at 15. We put a number in there for 45, kind of thinking that's where they were going, and that's kind of what they indicated to us. Our contracts expired. We went out to bid, and we came back in at $25 a piece. So, you know, we don't want to charge the users any more than we need to cover costs. So I'm here to request a reduction for that price, that item from 45 to 25. And that'll run through the end of June to get everything online with the fiscal year as we're doing the stickers. So this shouldn't happen next year.
And you've already had your public hearing to set the fees, so rather than have another public hearing, I'm proposing in the motion that you just amend your vote at the previous public hearing, so we can implement them right away.
Great.
Can I just ask a question?
Sure.
What is the definition of bulky furniture?
Couches, recliners, mattresses, basically any piece of furniture that's big.
Not an appliance.
Not an appliance. So
appliance.
this is just couches, love seats,
That's good to know.
recliners.
Because I don't know if you've noticed, sometimes around town, people just leave those out on the road here and there. So it's good to know that they're accepted at the transfer
Yeah,
station.
absolutely.
And there's no need to just throw it out on the curb and hope someone picks it up.
After that was
So,
fancy lawn furniture.
yeah. Okay, good.
Motion.
Good. Move that the Board of Selectmen vote to amend its vote from the August 13th, 2018 public hearing and reduce the fee for disposal of bulky furniture from $45 each to $25 each, effective forthwith.
Second.
It's been moved in second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item has to do with the Veterans Corner Memorial. Did you lead on that? Cindy, you work on that?
Yes, Cindy brought this forward. It's a grant opportunity that's available through the Massachusetts State Historical Records Advisory Board, and that the Secretary of State, I think, administers. And there is the opportunity to go after state funding of up to $15,000. They're doing it as you submit a letter of intent first, and then you are invited or not to submit a grant application afterwards. And Cindy's provided us with this schematic, and the information about the Veterans Corner project.
Sure. Want to speak up?
Sure. So, we've been working on this for a year now, updating the Veterans Corner. I've been working closely with John Borowski, who is here this evening, to compile the list of names to be added to the Veterans Corner. You can see in the far right corner, column rather, those are the names that have been gathered to date. There's 456 names to be added to the corner. So we're hoping to do that with the addition of 2 new monuments at the entranceway to the corner, as seen in the upper left-hand image. And so we started last year with a GoFundMe campaign that went very well, and raised, I think, close to $13,000 through that, within a few private donations as well. It's my understanding the Legacy Fund, there might be some money coming from there. The boosters are selling patriotic tiger paws. They have been for a year now, and we're expected to get 1,000 or 2,000 from that fundraising endeavor. We're planning to reopen the GoFundMe or start advertising it again this Veterans Day, and just try to move forward with the project. It's my hope that we can put this out to bid at the beginning of the year and have it completed by Veterans Day 2019. Since we have all the information in place that we need, we just need to pull it all together. And this grant would be excellent to provide that additional funding that we may need, that we are going to need to complete the project.
Thank you. John, anything you want to mention?
The only other thing that I say is that, we've already started doing the funding. That's one of the requisites of getting the grant, is that you have to have active funding, so that they would add to that. So that's why we have a good chance of getting it, I think. That's why I would like to see it approved.
Board members? Anything?
Actually, thank you, Cindy and John, and all those that have stepped up and volunteered and have been doing a lot of work on this and getting the word out. And, obviously, it's a worthwhile cause. And, just want to thank you.
If nothing else, maybe we have a motion?
Sure. Move that the Board of Selectmen vote to authorize the submission of a letter intent to the Massachusetts State Historical Records Advisory Board for a Veterans Heritage Grant for Littleton's Veteran Corner Memorial Project.
Second.
Moved and seconded, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Thank you very much. Good work, John. Good work, Cindy. Moving on to 3A, having to do with review the article smart sewer update and amend the budget.
Just if I could, Mr. Chairman, by way of recap, here are the 12 articles that are on the warrant for the October 29th special town meeting. Article 6, transfer ownership of Turkey Farm parcels to the town, has been withdrawn by the planning board. So we had wanted to schedule a discussion with planning and conservation about that tonight in order to determine whether to move forward, and planning has withdrawn it now. So there are a number of parcels that would get turned over to the town ultimately from that Turkey Farm Estates subdivision, but no action needs to be taken at this town meeting. It'll come back at a future time. Bills of prior years, we don't have any at this point, so if that pulls up, that would be an article that would be withdrawing. There were you have not taken positions on the 2 zoning amendments, and I don't think there was any expectation that you would. So the only article there were 2 articles that we wanted to talk about tonight. One is to get an update on the smart sewer project, since it's, a big item, and want to use the opportunity of tonight's meeting to just update folks. And I know that there are some other activities planned. There's another public meeting that's coming up on October 24th. Several trips to other town boards. In the meantime, we have, very importantly, we have a meeting with which we're hoping we get the secretaries themselves of Environmental Affairs and Economic Development this Thursday in Boston. Their offices are working to schedule times that work for the secretaries. So we'll be happy to see what specific amount of state funding we might be able to project for the sewer project. And we've got Kent with us tonight to talk about that. And just to, before we do, just to say the one other thing that the board had wanted to talk about tonight was whether to offer further budget amendments for fiscal 2019, specifically to talk about a plan for funding the second school resource officer, so that if there were agreement on funding it for the new year, fiscal 2020, that you might be able to, if we put the money aside, you might be able to start it sooner than next July 1st and have a discussion about that. So I'd say for starters, I'd say let's go to, let's talk about the sewer project, if that's okay.
Can I just ask our town moderator if he has anything he wants to mention about town meeting? Tim?
No, I got an excellent preview from Keith this afternoon.
We'll be on TV. I guess what we could say is, please bring this with you. As it
Right.
says, the please bring this with you town meeting book that was mailed out
That's what you need, yeah.
last week. I think a lot of folks received it, so it should be all set.
You want to take a lead on this?
Sure, I'll take the lead and then I'll turn it over to Ken for a brief update. So there are a couple things I want to touch on. One is, first and most importantly, our trip down to Beacon Hill to meet with the Secretary of Housing and Economic Development and the Secretary of Energy and Environmental Affairs really signifies that this is, it depends on how you look at it. It's either an environmental project with genuine and legitimate economic benefits, or it's an economic development with sort of a rare unicorn, an economic development project that has environmental benefits, and it can be understood in both contexts. Here's where we're at as far as engaging the public, answering questions, and getting us from now until town meeting, because we, the Board of Selectmen, don't have a meeting that's just us between now and then. First and most importantly, on October 24th at 6:30?
6:30 at Littleton High School.
Okay, 6:30, Littleton High School. We're gonna be holding a sewer forum. We're sending out postcards to all residents. It's a follow-up to this informative mailing that went out to all residents about the Smart Sewer Project. The forum is really intended to address specific questions that people have. And the way we can make the greatest use of that forum is to get your questions ahead of time. So the postcard that's going out has an email address on it that people can send questions. Now, we will take questions at the forum as well. But the ideal scenario is, we get 10 questions about one particular topic. It allows me to crystallize that question, hopefully address, that one idea once, rather than having people ask multiple times. We're going to present that live, of course, but we're also going to film it. LCTV will be there, is that right?
LCTV will be there, it will be live that evening. There'll be, you can also email that night too, but like you said, we prefer to have the questions in advance. And we are gonna stream it to also social media at the same time.
Are we gonna do
Yeah,
the
we're gonna
Facebook?
give it a shot.
Okay. I wasn't sure if I should stick with, we're gonna try a Facebook Live.
Yeah.
Facebook Live, is that what we're
It's gonna have a
try?
link to the LCTV site,
Okay.
so there'll be just another easy way to get to the video.
And so that, bring your questions, send your questions ahead of time. To the extent that we've gotten questions, and we've gotten lots of them, everything from physically how it works to how it's funded, and questions and concerns through various forms that we've engaged in up to this point. We're also incorporating those questions, ideas, concerns, etc. In addition to that, which will be our primary point of engaging the public, FinCom is
Next Tuesday.
next Tuesday.
October 23rd.
Third, yeah.
And then, am I missing a meeting? I think that's pretty much it. This, FinCom, this meeting, FinCom, and And that's sewer funds, is that right?
Did the water commissioners happen?
I don't think we've gotten confirmation on
I think they're meeting Thursday night.
Okay. I think we're gonna send Paul to that schedule, so. So that said, that's where the public outreach component of this is. Tonight, we're happy to take questions. To the extent that we're able to answer questions, be happy to do that here. To the extent that we're not able to answer them, though we have our consultant here in the room to help us answer them, we'll put them on the list to make sure that they get addressed during the sewer forum in a couple of weeks. So, I mean, I can talk about this a lot longer, but I don't think anybody needs to watch
Wednesday
it.
night at 6 is the water commission.
And so, with that, I mean, I guess, first, board questions, and then we can.
And from the board, before we turn it over to Kim.
I think a lot of the questions that we're getting around town is relative to finances and, you know, what's the impact for the average taxpayer and, you know, how far reaching it is. As great a graphic as this is, when it comes in the mail, it's kind of tough, and I've actually had people specifically come up and say, well, this is my property right here, and it looks like this parcel could have sewer to it, and it's a big parcel, could that possibly be developed? So I think there's a lot of lot-specific questions that we can anticipate.
It looked like you had more, but I wanted to address that one specifically. So what folks need to be prepared for when we bring this to town meeting is that we're asking for the design monies. Now, what we've done to this point is, did we call it a feasibility? It's essentially a feasibility study, which is, you know, does this make sense from a financial perspective for the town to go forward? And so what we are not going to be able to do at town meeting is answer all of the very specific, detailed questions about, you know, what are the bylaws associated with this, you know, sewer going to be? Exactly when is it going to go in? You know, what's the make and model of the pump, you know? We're not gonna be able to answer those. The objective is, and the timeline is that if the voters approve the monies for the design, all of those really important, but more detailed questions will get answered as we go through the design process, and there will be ample opportunity to get community feedback. So one of the concerns we have had is, right, if you bring sewer by a property, does that mean it can now become a high-rise, right? And the really nice thing about this timing is that it fits in with our discussion of zoning for the common as a whole. And so the town will have an opportunity to decide, much like we're looking at the zoning in the common, what we want this to look like. Do we, as a community, want these parcels to be able to develop beyond the capacity that the parcel could sustain with septic systems alone? And we haven't answered that. We haven't answered that as a small working group, because we think that would be getting out in front of the community. It's something that the community needs to answer, and that's part of what the design process will be. So as far as specific parcels are concerned, happy to answer them, but there will be, and I promise you this, there will be questions that we cannot or cannot responsibly answer at town meeting, because though we've spent a good chunk of change on understanding what this means, what we're really asking for is the design money to dot the i's, cross the t's, put the plans together before this actually gets, you know, put out to bid. So I interrupted you so I could.
No, I think a lot of the questions that we're hearing around town are a lot of the questions that are gonna come to us at the forum, at FinCom, and continue to come to us at Marco Baskin, Donovan's, and wherever else, the ball fields and.
And I will tell you, one of the principal questions that we're working to address, and Kent has met with our financial team, because honestly, I don't think we did a good job of presenting this piece of information to the public, because we didn't refine the data the right way, though it was very much all there, is exactly what this is going to cost the town of Littleton and the taxpayers as a whole, because the town of Littleton is a significant user of the proposed sewer. So we're packaging that up in a way that's much more understandable than, Kent's very detailed, but very complicated cost estimating spreadsheets. So that is one that we have not lost and will unequivocally be able to answer as far as our projections are concerned.
Thank you.
That's great, that was helpful. It's really helpful.
Turn it over to you here.
So I don't have a lot more to offer. I think the big thing is Chase, as you said, we're trying to answer a lot of questions. We're moving very quickly through as many of the financial questions in particular as we can, and at the same time trying to emphasize additional opportunities for funding. So looking forward.
And at the same time, trying to beat the drum for
Yeah.
more funding.
Well, and that's the thing. So we're hoping that we can actually get the number to go up on the funding side. Everything we've heard to date is positive. Hopefully we'll hear more things positively on Thursday. I think the biggest question is, how can we answer more questions faster? And that, as you said, the benefit that we would get is the more people that can get us questions ahead of time or at the public meeting that we have, the quicker we can get those questions answered. I do, like you said, I do feel strongly that we can answer a lot of questions. There may be a couple that are TBD. Certainly there's gonna be a lot of detailed work that's gonna have to be done once we get the design moving forward. Eventually we'll answer all those questions. We're in a position to answer most of the ones we need to right now, so I think we're in pretty good shape. The hope is that between now and the FinCom meeting next week, I'll be continuing to get some more information to Steve Venuti and Bonnie, provided them with some stuff today.
Good.
Continuing to work with the finance folks, and hopefully we'll be in good shape to answer those questions on, what's that, Tuesday night as well? Tuesday night as well. Yep, so.
And to Ken's point about meeting with different groups, you know, what we've not been shy about, and I may regret this, but very much am willing to do, we are willing to do, is engage with whatever small group, whether that's a group of residents, whether that's a group of businesses, whether that's, I mean, Wednesday I'm meeting with Rotary, you know, we've met with the Littleton Business Association, we've met with certain concerned residents. We're more than happy to bring the show on the road to you and a handful of your neighbors, you know, you and the couple of commercial properties next door. So please don't hesitate to reach out to us. The mailer's got information about where you can contact us, the website, or worst case scenario, email any one of us, Keith or Andy, and we're more than happy to meet with folks and answer questions if you don't want to answer it or ask it in a public forum. So questions from the public?
Gino from Board of Health. Okay, you're an engineer, okay? I work on construction, I work on septic, I work on the sewage. I just want you guys, the people ask me, Gino says, you know what's going on. Tell us, and tell them, when you say it's gonna be 25 or $30 million, just let them know that sometime it might go up like 3%, 5%. Don't say it's gonna be $27 million, then you end up with $35 million. And also, in my estimation, is always get customers first, so they can say, I like to have connected. Now, right now, you're in a blind. You get it from the high school all the way to the common. How many people will be able to say, yes, connect me? You gotta get your customers first. But the engineer here, you're an engineer, so you know what I'm talking about.
But Gino, let me push back on that a little bit, because we can't get customers unless we know how much it's gonna cost, which is why we've gotta go back and forth, which is why we've done exactly what we've done, which is reach out to folks in a non-binding way, you know, anybody that's responded to the sewer survey, nobody's, you know, gonna twist your arm to play ball. But that's exactly what we did. We said first, actually, we did some rough cost estimating. Then we engaged the public and said, if it costs about this, do you want to play? You know, then we took that data from how much participation we expected, we fed it back into the cost model, refined the cost model, and unfortunately, we didn't have to iterate again because our costs were comparable to what we told people we expected them to be. But you're absolutely right that, you know, they've got to move simultaneously together. And I think personally, as an engineer, that we're at a point where we've got, I would say, more than sufficient information to understand the viability of the system, which was the fundamental goal of the feasibility study. Also to your question about, costs could go up. No doubt about it. What we've got in this, in fact, I was interrogating Kent just earlier today. We've got a 10% construction contingency in there. And on top of that, Kent is not, it's not his first rodeo, right? So he hasn't anticipated it's all gonna be built today, right? So we've got some growth in that number as well. So, you're right, this is a big construction project. That's absolutely true.
It's not really that big. The question is, it's a small one, because on the one I worked, they were doing it for 6 towns. You're talking about like 600,000 people.
Well, I appreciate that
25
point.
years ago was $105 million. What happened? They made a little mistakes here and there, so they lost $10 million. For some reason, they were able to recuperate that money. But what I'm saying is, specify to the town that you get a grant from the state first, so they know that some money is coming from the state. I understand that some money is coming from the state. Am I correct?
We
Let the-
hope so.
Let the
That's-
public know.
Yeah, that's Thursday's mission. We're meeting with 2 cabinet secretaries to bring back what the dollar amount is.
Right, because I find out that some money is coming back. The question is, let them know, and then, I don't like to see the town get stuck with $20 million, and then we have to pay for it, and then they say, look at those selectmen, look what a big mistake they made. So trying to emphasize and trying to complete the situation so people understand. And only those people that are connected should be able to pay for it. If they're not connecting to the sewage, maybe someday they will, maybe in 10 years or so. Because some people already have new septic systems. And many, they come in front of us. So I know many that are coming.
And let me touch on that idea for just a moment, the option to defer connection. This is one of those where the specifics are to be determined. What's the deferral period that we would allow people to pursue?
10 years.
But 10 years off the top of my head sounds great, but what we haven't done is landed on that specific number yet. But I will tell you that the sewer study committee, and I hazard to speak for the rest of the board here, that we're very much committed to a deferral period in there, and one that makes sense. Now, is it 8 years, 10 years, 12 years? I don't know. We've still got to work out those nuances, but there absolutely will be some option to defer connection to some point certain.
And for the future, because I understand it's going to be only for the common in the future, so you are prepared. On Goldsmith Street, put a nice T. When it comes to pipe, put a nice T in case somebody said, oh, I'd like to connect it, so you get the beginning of it.
You're speaking my language, I would love to take this all the way down Goldsmith. I will tell you, as far as folks who want to connect to it, though we've sent out the surveys, and this is a really important thing for folks who look at this map to understand, though we've sent out the surveys, if you said no on the survey, you're also not locked in, and if you said yes, you're locked in, can't change your mind. But if you said no, you can change your mind. So what we still have the option to do is fine tune this a little bit to the extent that there is one more property. We've got 10 houses in a row and the 11th house is in the district, but the 11th house wants to connect. We can certainly consider those options. What we're not going to be able to do is 10 houses want to connect, 10 more houses down from them don't want to, and then the 21st house wants to connect. Sorry, 21st house, you're probably stuck. There is a degree of continuity that we need to make this economically viable for all.
And also be prepared when the surge comes. A lot of houses, an individual comes and says, I want to buy your home. I'll give you $1 million. Because he says, well, I can build maybe 3 or 4 floors. I can put condominium. I'll get my money back in 10 years. So you emphasize that too. Make sure, if they allow when the surge comes, how high they can go. 3, 4 floors, 5 floors.
Well, and that's precisely what I was talking about. That's one of the details that we as a community, if we decide to go forward with the sewer, need to decide for ourselves in the context of Board of Health regulations, in the context of zoning regulations. And that's a conversation that we absolutely will have. What are we comfortable with? What do we want to see for the redevelopment of the common? And it fits into the context of what we're engaging with now. But I will tell you that at town meeting, what we are not going to be able to do is answer that question specifically. What will the regulations look like? Because if I dared to hazard a guess, it would be only a guess and subject really to the will of the
It's
voters.
something you people have to deal with, and I wish you a lot of luck. The question is, you're gonna gain when you have the sewage treatment on the common, and if you put a T on Goldsmith Street, you're gonna be small house becoming like a 2 or 3 families. Just remember that.
That's not necessarily the case, Gino.
No, I know, but I'm saying you're gonna gain 2,000 people in Littleton, which is gonna bring taxes revenue. I like to see money coming to the town, because after all, we need it. But then you need more officers, remember, every 1,000 people is 1 office. You still here? No, he's gone. All right.
I will say, Gino, that's not necessarily the case, and that's why we'll need zoning to go around this, you know. And frankly, we're gonna need to work with you at Board of Health to understand, do we as a community want to only allow properties connected to the sewer to develop to the extent that they would be able to develop if they were putting in a septic system? And we haven't answered that, and maybe that's not a universal yes or no. Maybe that's a no in some parts of the common. Maybe parts of the common, we say, actually, you know what? We would really like some mixed use, but other parts of the sewering district, that's not for us, you know. This is what we've decided
Down in the common,
is single-family homes, and so they're going to be constrained by what would be a septic system, and we're not going to try and answer that question at town meeting, except to say that
It might come up.
if this goes forward, we absolutely will engage the public in how do we want to address this as a community.
I wish you a lot of luck, because you're trying to do the best you can for the town.
Appreciate it, Jim.
Moving on. Anything else?
I have a question. Has the finance committee?
Excuse me.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Do we want to take,
Yeah, I'd say you could take it.
Okay.
Sure.
Are you sure? I don't want to.
just introduce yourself? and-
Oh, yeah, I apologize. Bruce Jorgens, New Estate Road. Question I have is, the finance committee received information regarding the sewer project or the cost to provide a recommendation to the voters or a report as of today's meeting?
Finance Committee is adopting their recommendation next Tuesday night, and there is updated financial information. We met with the finance team a week or so ago, and there's updated information that the consultants have now produced that will be available for the Finance Committee. One of the main numbers that we're trying to plug in, though, is that state funding. How much state funding can we have go towards this project? Because it's critical for us to know that. We have a placeholder that, I won't say what it is in case the state's watching, because we would like more than that. But we are thinking of a number, and we are hoping that we can get more from the state than what our minimum number is to make this go forward.
And to go after that, you know, the model as of about 2 weeks ago, we're looking at potential state funding in the range of, you know, $2 to 10 plus million dollars.
Fingers crossed, man.
Yeah, right. I mean, best case scenario, right, the state says, actually, we think this is a really great idea. We'd like to pick up half the tab. That's, I mean, I would love it, but I don't think that's probably realistic. But what we didn't do is smash a square peg into a round hole here and say, well, we're gonna assume $10 million without a basis. And we split the difference, and I think our initial economic models were somewhere in between that. But we think there's a realistic capacity for the state to partner with us, in part because this represents, now I'm talking to our state reps, this represents a real opportunity for the state to look at a solution for a lot of communities that are just like Littleton, that have problems very similar to ours in terms of groundwater, economic development, you know, and the myriad economic and environmental issues. So we think that they'll want to partner with us, and we've tried to be conservative but realistic in what that number is. So far we've split the difference, and we're working towards answering the Finance Committee's questions.
Okay, so that was the I mean, I think it's a fantastic idea, but as of today's meeting,
the finance committee is unable to provide a recommendation or a report.
That was,
That's forthcoming.
I would say that's forthcoming.
Yes,
Well,
okay.
Yeah, if I may, so Gary Wilson, Finance Committee, how are you? We're a frugal bunch, I guess, in the Finance Committee, so we try to wait when these, obviously this is a big project. These type of things, we typically wait as long as we can to get all these numbers that are coming in to the last minute. That's why our meeting is really, you know, up and pushing right up to the 23rd. So, and it's all this information comes into Bonnie's team and she shares it with us. We can make our best, you know, our best guess, you know, or recommendation, if you will, as a board. So that's kind of why you see we don't jump ahead of this, or we lag a little bit behind, and then
You want to get it right.
Right,
Right.
the best we can, right?
Right.
So come town meeting, we'll have our recommendation for sure.
Okay.
So
Thank
bring
you.
it up at town meeting. What's your recommendation?
Anything else in town meeting you want to bring up?
That was it. So let me just take a look at my notes here.
We have the stuff with the SRO and that.
Yeah, the next discussion is on the budget amendments that we want to talk about, and Bonnie has prepared a, thanks, Ken.
Good.
Yeah, we can let Ken go?
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
unless you guys want to hear me talk.
Everyone else has to stay.
I'll stay after, talk to me.
Thank you. Bonnie has a
Thanks, okay.
memo that's included in your packet regarding funding, and maybe I'll try to put it up on the screen, and maybe you just walk us through.
My brain.
Bottom line is, should you wish to, what we were talking about last time was the notion that the board was interested in seeing how we could fund the second police school resource officer in the current fiscal year budget, rather than wait till next year, fiscal 2020. And so the information that Bonnie put together, it offers a couple of scenarios with, and I think it's important to understand fundamentally, there are two ways to fund an additional officer, and one is the town adds it to the town side of the budget entirely, what the costs are, and that's how the rest of the police department is funded. It's on our side exclusively. So that's an option if you want to go forward. The other way to proceed would be to do some cost sharing with the school committee. And the school committee is going to be at the joint meeting with FinCom next Tuesday night, and that's an opportunity to see whether there's a scenario under which they could cost share. What does that cost sharing mean particularly? I think it would mean that half of the cost would need to come from money that on the town side is transferred into the police budget. And that's what this proposed motion would do. The amount of $21,000 would come from general insurance and instead go into the police line. We've already committed some amount of police funds going into police from ambulance services to pay for the two dispatchers. We put $21,000 more in the police budget to pay for half of the cost of the second SRO for the period January 1st through June 30, 2019. Half of the total cost is $42,000. Half of that cost is $21,000. The other half of the cost would need to come from the school budget in order to, in order to start on January 1st. Worst case, the school that you don't reach agreement with the school department to fund it, then you could fully fund, instead of having half funding for 6 months, you could have full funding for 3 months if it's only in the town side. Just in terms of how to, you know, what's it feasible to pay for. Town has $21,000 that Bonnie indicates that we can transfer to another budget, operating budget. And that's a scenario to proceed. The thought was, though, that that ultimately the agreement you need to reach is how are you going to fund a balanced budget in fiscal 2020? So what's the funding source for continuing this position, the second SRO?
Fully on our side.
Well, for the future. I mean, what is it? Is it partially on is there cost sharing or not for fiscal 2020? There could be. We pointed up, and Bonnie's memo points up again, that the school budget will see a reduction of about $71,000 in its energy costs, thanks to the $250,000 worth of Green Communities capital improvements that are being grant funded. So if there were an agreement reached between the selectmen and the school committee in the course of time in preparing the fiscal 2020 budget about cost sharing or not for a second SRO, that would be important information that you'd want to know before you actually have the SRO start in this current fiscal year. But once you know that, once you know what the deal is a deal that the town wants it so much that even if let's accentuate the positive, that jointly you want it so much that you're going to cost share, that somehow if the school committee's budget was going to be an increase of this much, the way the formula works, instead they'd accept a lesser amount of an increase so that the amount that would have gone to them instead is used to fund the portion of the second SRO. Once you reach agreement on fiscal 2020, then you take a step back and say, all right, now we're ready to have this position start sooner than July 1st, 2019. That's the importance of transferring money in at the special town meeting. By putting the $21,000, which is all we have to put on the table, every cent of unallocated revenue could go to the police department for this second SRO. And then you implement that on whatever date you're able to do it. Arguably, somewhere between, it's either January 1st or April 1st, either 6 months or 3 months remaining for the fiscal year. But you'd have the ability to do that. If you don't transfer the money into the budget in this article, then you don't have the ability to start it sooner than July 1st. It would be July 1st. So this preserves the option. It gives you time to work out the deal with the school committee to see whether there's cost sharing or not. And if you can't come to an agreement on cost sharing, if you're ultimately not able to reach a deal with the school department about having them help contribute to the cost of this, then you still have the option to fully fund it on the town side, which might be based on the current budget projections, though, what the shortfall is about $500,000. I mean, optimistically, that always seems to close as we get
A little higher than our normal
closer.
start,
So what we wanted to do is to just give you the building blocks for how can you do it? What are the steps that would need to be taken to preserve the option to start it earlier? And it's by amending the motion under Article 2 to include the additional $21,000 going to the police budget. What did I leave out?
I think you've got it.
Yeah.
This is just, putting the blocks in place like Keith had mentioned. It doesn't require that you do, the hiring at all, but if there is an agreement reached, we can go forward.
Lloyd?
How is the proposed 50-50 split reached? How did we land on 50-50? Between, in an ideal scenario as you present it, between the town and the school budget.
The initial request was to hire the SRO right after town meeting and to put in a building block case together for that scenario. The salary is about 60,000. The benefits are another, 22,000 because it's a group 4 hire. So half of that, on an annualized basis would be 42,000 if we're going to try and cost share it. Trying to get, to the October date, it was going to be a little bit less than that. I couldn't find enough money in the budget to transfer, but I could find 21,000, and I figured, well, that'll get us a mid-year hire, best case scenario. So I kind of backed into that number with what we had available from resources.
Thank you. The schools, I know Chief Bernard went to the school committee last Thursday, they didn't have a full board, so I don't think they made any decisions, but was there any feedback from anyone from the school?
I have not received anything today.
I mean, I will say I'm hesitant to get out in front of the school's needs until the school has identified what those needs are. If there's $71,000 worth of savings from the Green Communities Grant, and that's sort of the number that we're working with. What I want to know from the school committee is if you had to have, if you can add one position, what is the one position that is most effective at addressing the social and emotional concerns? And I'm hesitant to say, we like an SRO, and get out in front of that and address a need that they don't think is a priority compared to not important and not something that isn't serving value, but not their highest priority. If what the school committee identifies as what we actually need is another psychologist, a mental health professional, some other context, then I don't know why we would provide something that is less than consistent with their priority. My other concern is that 50-50 sounds nice, right? School, town, budget's about 50-50, but in terms of timeshare, I'm gonna hazard a guess it's more like 75-25 between time spent working on behalf of the schools and time spent doing other town work. And so I would argue that the way that the school committee needs to express their prioritization here, which is what they do in a normal budgeting cycle, and we're getting ahead of this, is to include 3/4 of the cost of an SRO in their budget for next year. If we do this, we're simply getting out in front of it, and what are we gonna do, hire an SRO for 3 or 6 months until the school committee decides to actually build a budget, decide what their priorities are? Well, now they're not objectively looking at priorities, now they've got somebody sitting there without a defined position. We've backed into it, and we've backed into something that's less than optimal from an educational perspective. And it's not that an SRO doesn't provide a remarkable amount of value. My concern is providing the maximum amount of value. And I'm concerned that we're getting out in front of the prioritization process. And furthermore, we're skewing the costs associated with what the town should bear for something that is a school resource. So that said, I'm very interested to hear what the school committee has to say. And my sense is if the school committee says, yes, we acknowledge this need, this is an important need, and the way that we want to address this is the SRO, because frankly, we have more expertise in what the school needs than the Board of Selectmen. I'm 100% good with it. But I want the schools to lead the charge and identify what is the single biggest priority here, rather than us get in front of it.
So if I may respond a little bit to that. So I did have we had a joint meeting with Superintendent Clenchey and the wellness coaches at the high school level to institute Project Alert, which I talked to the board about. And part of that program is utilizing the second SRO to teach that curriculum, along with Alexa Paragolotis from the Wilton Coalition Against Addiction. That program is going to begin in January. So during that conversation with Kelly Clenchey, he told me that they did just hire a full-time additional mental health provider, and I don't know the exact title of that individual. They were slated to start, right before they were going to start, they actually got another job. So they were looking to fill that position again. So there is another mental health provider coming on board. So I appreciate your concern, or question rather, to the school committee. What is your priority? Is this a priority to you? Historically, the police department has always paid for the SRO. It's never been, since its inception, never covered under the school budget. So this is the first time that they've asked for any help from the school department.
I thought the first SRO was partly funded by the schools
It was funded by a grant.
A grant.
Oh, it was partly
Yeah,
funded.
exactly. But then after that, since that time, it's been through the police department's budget. So this is the first time that they've asked for any assistance from the school budget for this position. It's definitely a conversation to have with the school. I'm looking forward to our joint meeting with them coming up, because I didn't watch the tape, but I know that there was a lengthy discussion about the position with Chief Bernard and the committee. At this time, I just would like to have the option available to us in the event that we can work it out with the school and figure out what we want to do going forward in 2020 and in the interim. I just feel if we can do it, I think it's important enough that we try to institute it now in January, and then look at it, sustainability for the position going forward. But I'd like to at least have the option before us. And I think there's enough time between now and town meeting that we can have that discussion.
Absolutely, we should be having the discussion. I do think that Chief Bernard will die on the hill to have it in the 2020 budget for sure. If we collectively, the Board of Selectmen and the school committee, come together and decide to do the 50-50 split, to have somebody mid-budget cycle from January until the end of June, he'll be very happy to have that. I know he's gonna fight to have it in 2020, it's part of his budget, I think one of you may have seen at this point. He's working toward rolling that into his budget for the 2020 budget, as I understand it. The precedent that could be set by us doing a mid-budget shift and bringing somebody on mid-budget that wasn't, isn't low staffing, and just, it's an added body. It's not unprecedented, but it's not really, doesn't follow our policies, financial policies, and so I think we need to take that all into consideration. But I think we kind of concur with what Chase has to say relative to the school committee opining and letting us know where they stand and where their priorities are. I think you were using, as an example, a sociologist or a psychologist or medical professional.
And what I'm really expressing there is that that's not my area of expertise, and I want those whose area of expertise it is to articulate what is the top priority.
Right.
And you're right, I was using a mental health professional, but
It
for
could
all
be
I know,
anything.
another one is, but
Yeah.
I don't know, and
Right.
I want to understand what that is.
Absolutely.
So I think the conversation needs to continue. I don't know that, will it continue?
Next Tuesday night is when, part of the discussion, or the purpose of having the discussion tonight is to prepare for the joint meeting that's next Tuesday night. So the school committee will be there, finance committee, selectmen, and if you were to reach an agreement, you sort of run out of time after that. I mean, it's the town meeting is on the 29th, that joint meeting is on the 23rd. If you can reach an agreement that night, then maybe you'd feel, then you could vote you don't need to take this vote tonight, that you could also take this vote on the 23rd to see if you want to add, 21. You can do it tonight, if you're in agreement. You could also wait until next Tuesday to make the change,
Final decision.
after you've had a discussion with the school committee.
I mean, last ditch effort, if we really felt as though we wanted to make a decision, but we just couldn't come to an agreement or a decision next Tuesday, we could post for the 29th.
Yeah, we'll be
prior
posted
to-
at 6:30 on the night of town meeting on the 20th.
I'm in full agreement with waiting to get more information next week. I have absolutely no problem with that at all. I think that's the right course to take.
Could I ask a question about, you mentioned some programming that would benefit from having a second SRO. Would it be possible, so consider this scenario, we decide that we're uncomfortable implementing the position in 2020, but Bonnie has identified a certain amount of money that we could put towards this objective. To the extent that we were shortchanging the police department to put on certain programs by someone who's trained to be an SRO,
Right.
could we supplement the police department's budget with some of that $21,000 to make sure that they're fully staffed? And for short periods of time to put on these programs, we also effectively have 2 SROs to put the program on. Now, it's not a full-time position, we would have to supplement their budget to, pay some overtime or, bring someone in from on-call or something like that. But then we could sort of hit both objectives at the same time, as well as giving whoever was putting on the program as the second SRO some valuable experience, and frankly, giving the town some valuable insight into their performance as an SRO.
Right. Well, as far as the Project Alert goes, he already has an officer that's been trained and certified to teach that program. So I wish he was here so he could provide more information, but that's not a bad suggestion. The program's gonna go forward in January regardless of whether or not there's a second SRO. There's already been an officer trained and certified to teach that course. So as much as the two are related, one isn't dependent on the other. Okay.
We all set with this?
I think so, everybody can take action. And then I just asked Bonnie, is there any, do you see any other paths or any of the
No, I agree with
options?
what Chase had brought up as an option. If you put the funding in place, then you could decide as you go through the next few months, if you want to use that funding for an actual hire for an SRO or additional shift coverage to put somebody in those circumstances
Right.
to do that function part-time. Or as
Those budget line items could align in such a way
It
that.
goes into the wages, so yes, as long as the board agrees that that's how they want to have that funding used, then
Do we keep
Okay.
we keep that.
tether on
Yes.
it so we can pull it back?
We're going to what, 3B, assignment of articles. I would say Paul Blaney.
Second. So you get from not being there during the assignment, right? I've learned that.
So we can put Chase down for the sewer, right?
And I would respectfully ask, given the amount of time I need to prepare for that,
That's it?
you don't stick me with anything else?
We're gonna give you the liquor licenses on town.
Oh, good.
Going down, bills of prior years, that's already been wiped out. 2019 budget assignments?
The amendments?
Yeah, amendments, sorry. I'll take it as amendment.
Joe, are you gonna go over again?
He's gonna be.
You gonna pick all of them?
Call the articles, that's what he goes.
What we need, maybe it actually works the other way. Maybe all the ones Joe selects are the ones that end up on the call of the articles.
We're gonna need the call of the articles, Jim.
Joe, I can help with that one too, as far as the veterans.
Is that part of that one?
Yeah, it is part of it.
All right, then, yeah, all right.
Okay, so Cindy, take it then?
Yeah, Cindy, take it.
Okay.
Yeah, a lot of people were upset with that.
Collective bargaining?
3, yeah, collective bargaining.
Who's got that?
I'll go with it.
Sure. Excise tax on marijuana adult
Is
use.
that default? What do you want?
It doesn't matter. I'll take it, Bob can take it, whatever.
Who? Give it to Paulie, or you take it.
I'll take that one. I'll take 3 and 4, so I already have the microphone.
All right, I'll take 5.
Road acceptance. Joe, keep Tom's going on.
Okay, 7, transfers property of the highway department. Will that just be the water department? We speaking on it too?
The water department will, they'll carry the water. Right.
Put me down for that one, then if we need to speak to it, I think we can talk about the horse trading.
Okay. Okay,
I
bring
think I
us,
can sit back now, right?
yeah. Number 8, supplemental 2019 capital items from available funds, traffic signalization at the high school.
I can talk to that one.
But Paul's not here.
Oh, true.
Look at Paul 8.
Yep.
B, master plan implementation, form-based zoning.
Oh, I'm just giving Paul all of it. No? You want to go A, B, C?
That's fine. Okay, bring it down.
Yeah.
Yeah, give Paul all of it.
I'll take
He's not
9.
here.
9,
Paul will be
You're welcome, buddy. You know who's watching.
Cindy's got 9, Jason has
10, and 11 and,
It's,
11 and 12.
That's planning board.
Planning board.
Yeah, we don't have a recommendation on that. So let's see, did everybody get something?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good, all right, great.
So Chase ended up getting 4, I'm sorry.
I knew that was
Yeah,
gonna.
while you were
Leave
out.
the room.
How do you feel about your health use marijuana?
All right, so we're all set with that one. Moving on, public input. So anyone has any public input, just identify yourself and your address. Anyone?
Excuse me, Margaret Smith, Littleton, of course, Taylor Street. I have a couple of concerns. One is our property has these big posters, these signs, and it's continual every single day for months and months. Yeah, that's one
Here's the
of
photo
them.
for today.
Thank you. That's one of them. At first, maybe they're kind of funny, but they're not anymore. They're just, some of them can be very offensive and disturbing. The bus stop's there. It's a busy area. People stop. We've had near misses, car accidents. Near misses, not car accidents, but possible car accidents. Hill Road, it's right by Liberty Square Park. And it's just causing a lot of commotion up there. And it's our neighbor who shares our driveway, they put those up. And we've never had any problem with them, they've been very nice up until the spring when they started putting these signs up. And it's just not right, we have to go in and out of the driveway, and this is our home, we've loved living here. But just to see that day in and day out, I asked him if he could please put them down, well, we have asked, and he said he would, but he did for a couple of weeks, and then they went back up again.
So,
So,
are these, from what I understand, it's actually located in town property, but is that, the property right behind it, is that your land behind it, or is it your neighbor's property?
that's, well, their house is the yellow house, closer to the street, and our house is set back, it's the white house, the white building.
You're the one that's set back right, directly across from Liberty Square?
Directly across from Hill Street, Hill Road.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, that's a better view of it, yes.
Yeah, so we can see the difference where the stone fence is, between the stone fence
Yes,
and the edge of the pavement width
Yes.
is public.
And our driveway is
Public
just a
property.
shared easement, and so I've asked him if he could put his signs down in our land by Crane Road, which is near Boxborough.
We don't want it over there.
And he, oh, Gary, you don't? Thank you. No, we have some vested interest. I feel trapped there between the medicinal building with all the work being done, the smell, the odor of the plant, whatever they're growing in there, whatever, I guess. I'm just overwhelmed with everything, and it's just too much. We're trying to sell our house. Our daughter just got into the police academy in Virginia, so we're trying to head down there to support her. And, you know, we've invested our home, and we're gonna take a loss in our house, for sure, because of it. So I've tried to work with Jason. He's been nice enough. We told him about this, this is my other issue. Well, the other issue, the posters, if you could just modify the bylaws of the poster signs for the future. We will be here probably a year from now, but for the future, for the residents, they shouldn't have to put up with these signs. They're too, I just don't think it sets a good example for people coming into Littleton to see signs like that. In other towns I've looked into it, I don't think they have signs like this. I drive around, I've never seen anything like this. At least if they're smaller. My neighbor across the street, her husband has a company, and apparently she told me that the town bylaws didn't allow her husband's refrigeration company sign
Very small.
because they have to make it smaller. But this is a political sign. This is very divisive. It's not, you know, and it might continue on for another 7 years like this. So Jason also knows about that. I spoke to him about the building next door. I've enjoyed living there. The trees are beautiful back there. We love the woods, but I think he's got a handle on the what's happening with the vents, and he told me that HVAC people will be in to check it out. But
So these are two separate issues. One
There's
is the
two
sign,
separate-
that guy's name
I'm
is
not
not
going
Jason.
back and
Jason
forth.
is the sanctuary
Jason
medicinal.
owns Medicinal Sanctuary.
Okay.
And he's been good. I told him about all the trees that were cut down, so he told me he assured me he would put the trees, he would plant some trees along the side of our land. And I also asked him about the pipeline coming out of the building. There's a water runoff from his building right into, not really our land, it's really the neighbor's land who puts those signs up. And there's a water runoff. Last Friday, we had a heavy rain, and there's a big water flow coming from the pipe onto the land, making a huge, big pools of water. And I just wanted to make sure that it's not chemicals coming out of the pipeline. He assured me it's not. He said it's rainwater. And then
Once again, it's two separate issues. That one we can speak to.
okay.
The sign issue, I know the board and building inspector have been in discussions and trying to find ways of aiding you. We seem to have some problems since it's a political sign and what people have the right to do and not to do. My first thing was, I thought it was too big. I thought the building inspector could just say it doesn't meet the requirements of the town, but from what, tell me if I'm wrong, my understanding was he wrote back and said he'd rather not getting into this because other towns have tried this and have been brought to court for freedom of speech, so I don't, yeah, I don't know what the actual answer is right now.
Short of us, this is a perfect representation of it. I think short of us taking enforcement action against everyone who puts a sign within the right-of-way, and that would include real estate signs, that would include political signs, that would include any signage independent of content, we can't do anything about a political sign in particular. And because a lot of signs are placed in the right-of-way, and frankly, we don't enforce them.
We let them be.
Yeah.
You know, that there are, especially during the campaign season, that there are political signs for candidates that are, you know, all over town, that if you look closely, that they're in a public right-of-way. And the long practice has been not to get into, I mean, if something was blocking traffic, if something was on the Common or in Fay Park or some particular public property where we had rules in place of how it's done, and we're treating everyone the same, you know, for the Common, for example, you get 2 weeks, it's an event sponsored by a nonprofit, and if you overstay your welcome in 2 weeks, we take the sign down. But we do that for everyone, and we don't have a similar procedure in place with respect to other signs in the right of way. And town council has also looked at it and is advising us that it's, even though it's not around a particular candidate or none of the signs that we've done, they're nevertheless political, that a court would view them as a political sign just as much as a candidate's sign is, so that if we were to take action against a particular sign, we should be prepared to take them against all signs. And that is not a step that we've come to yet. So
So political signs, I'm sorry, but this has been beyond 2 weeks. Why
Well,
can't they
but
be
there's
done?
there's no limit, there's no 2-week limit on political signs on the right of way. The only limit we have for time is for the use of, is for event signs at the common or other public properties. There's
So
no
that's-
time
oh,
limit.
because it's a-
There's no time limit, and if we were to impose a time limit, we would need to do it universally. For example, the town of Concord, where I live, has a time limit, I think of, I don't know if it's 2 weeks or a month or something. And when the Black Lives Matter sign had been there for a month, they ordered it down and got national coverage over taking those signs down. They were much smaller, and now they're all over town. They went back to town meeting and amended their bylaw to speak of commercial and non-commercial speech, content neutral. And we really need to be getting into some discussion like that to be able to pull out of it what we could do here. Apart from your neighbor just voluntarily agreeing to put the property on his own property, put the signs on his own property, in which case the building commissioner would be prepared to let them be there. But I don't know if that solves your problem either. You would just be able to see them on the other side of a fence, of a stone fence.
I don't know,
So I don't know if we, as a board, have a positive answer for you. I drove up there the day after you had sent the information in, and I wouldn't want it next to me either, but I just don't know what this board can accomplish right now. Mr. Wilson?
Gary Wilson, 1 Wilson Lane. So I do drive by this every day as well, so I understand the frustration. And I'm a big believer in freedom of speech. We keep talking about political signs. To me, many of these signs, if not every other one almost, is, to me, it's bigotry. We can call this political, and some of them are, but there's some of these. I wish I took a picture of every sign that went up there. Some of them, it's bigotry, and where do we draw that line? I don't know. We can go back one presidency, and if some of this, obviously a lot of this has to do with our current president and everything like that. If we go back one presidency and some of this was there, it would be automatic, obvious that there's a lot of bigotry. So I think what we're looking at is, because of our divisive climate right now, we're allowing some of this to look like, oh, that's just political. No, it's not political. Some of this is very dangerous and borderline. When you have to explain to your kids some of this stuff, it's not political. I mean, it doesn't pass the test of political. You know, okay, so you put the hashtag #MeToo on the Statue of Liberty.
that might look pretty cute. She's all dressed up holding ice cream, but this is a bus stop. Children get off that bus.
Yeah, there is a
right
bus
there.
stop for about 5 or 6 children.
There's been the Ku Klux Klan
Yep.
pictures, there's been
So
Trump
we're,
with his head bloody, it's
so
disgusting.
we're talking about political, we can't touch it. I think that's what Keith had mentioned. But
Well,
what is it,
we
what if
can't
it was a
touch it.
bigot, what if it was a KKK sign?
We can't
Could you
touch it, we can't touch it in isolation. That the key is that in order to defend the town's action, we would need to be acting uniformly on similarly placed signs with a neutral view to content.
Even though it's on the setback, on the town's property.
If it's on the town's property, if it's on the private property, there's like
No-
nothing,
no
there's
stand.
nothing that can be done. If these signs were all on the other side of the stone fence, there'd be no action for this board to take,
Yeah,
ever.
That's amazing to me that there's somewhere across our country, we can't find a law
It will eventually go to the Supreme Court,
that
wait.
is, you know, that a town or a community has come up with to prevent this type, and I'm gonna call it for what it is, it's bigotry,
Yeah.
okay? Because if I have to explain it to my kids or someone else's kids, I can't say, oh, that's because they don't like Trump, or that's because they don't like President Obama, or, I can't. It has nothing to do with it. it might be the anger inside that person's putting these signs up, but that's not what's being displayed there, because I can't explain it. So, and maybe I'm just talking about, we can't do anything about it, whether it's political, but I don't think we should use it's political as a crutch here. This should be all signs, and I think you're saying it's all signs. It doesn't matter if it was political or not. Private property, put your sign up there as long as it hasn't crossed the vulgar, we're not showing things like that, we're okay. We can't do anything about it. But
So we definitely, on private property, we can't do anything about it.
I mean,
But
you
this-
can push that back 2 feet, and it's probably on his property anyway, so it really isn't gonna solve the problem. I'm just surprised that, I don't know how much research town council has done, community. There's gotta be, why don't we see this everywhere? If
I will
if that's
say
the
this,
case.
This is a Supreme Court case.
Yeah,
Is there?
I'm no lawyer, but the Supreme Court has given wide deference to the First Amendment and
Right.
an individual person's definition of free speech. And frankly, I'm just not inclined to insert Littleton into that discussion, even though certainly some people find these things offensive. That is very far from the threshold necessary to define something as outside of the bounds of what the First Amendment protects.
I know, it's very loose. I get that. It's a shame. I wish the neighbors on either side, I wish you had a sign that had an arrow saying bigot with an arrow pointing at that sign or that yard, because that's what that is. And I'll call it for what it is. So, it's unfortunate.
Just back to the medicinal building, Jason said he's going to secure the doors so that the odor doesn't come out onto our land, because I, for one, do not want to smell pot on my driveway. I do not want to take walks and smell it every single day. So I've had that discussion with him. I'm sure he's gonna make a pretty penny over there, but I'm not happy. I'm not happy that it's right next door to me. I appreciate what it's doing, I guess, for people that are very sick and need it, but I don't want it in my backyard, my front yard, I should say. But it is there and I can't change it, so he's gonna put the trees up and hopefully that will help. And hopefully someone will come in and buy a house soon. But that's it, and I think that's it.
Sorry, we don't have a resolution for you tonight. I mean, we can certainly continue discussing. When I say we, I mean Anthony, because I'm trying to get a
Short time, huh?
Yeah. Thank you. Anyone else with public input?
That's what happened when the Commonwealth allowed people to smoke pot because of, their health or whatever. I said, send them to Colorado.
our sister city of Little.
Chief?
Only thing I'd like to say is this Saturday is the open house at the fire department from 10 to 2. There'll be all kinds of demonstrations, food, things for kids to do. It should be a good thing.
Thank you. Okay, board members, start with Cindy.
Sure. So I just wanted to let the community know there's a mental health first aid forum hosted by SANS, the See It New Sun Foundation, and the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. It's going to be held at the fire station October 22nd. It's an all-day event. Breakfast and lunch will be served, and if anyone is interested in attending, they should contact Barbara Wickham at 978-486-4928. I also wanted to congratulate the VFW Post 6556 for a certificate of recognition it received for outstanding community service program activities a couple weeks ago. The VFW does provide a wide range of services to our community. They participate in the parades, they visit the VA in Bedford. They work with the Boy Scouts on many community service projects. They care for the veterans' graves at Westlawn Cemetery. They also provide free rental space to a lot of organizations in our community, a lot of civic organizations. They use sports teams for their pre-game pasta dinners, nonprofit organizations, and they do a lot of other great events for our community, so it's nice to see them acknowledged. And in addition to that, I just wanted to mention there is a fundraiser at the VFW on October 27th being hosted by the Friends of the Littleton Veterans. It's a Halloween fundraiser. It starts at 7 o'clock. On Saturday night, costumes are optional. Loose Connection's going to play, but admission is only $5. and all the proceeds raised will go to the local veterans.
Thank you. Chief.
Okay, have a good night tonight.
Just a couple things. I just want to say hats off to Natalie Branch and all those in the Wellness Committee for pulling off the Wellness Fair this past weekend, this past Saturday at the middle school. I think it was well attended. Saw Barbara come there, and if there's anybody that's looking to get involved with a great organization, I know Barbara's looking for help and hopefully a succession plan for her. She's been tirelessly raising awareness on suicide in our community, in society. And if there's anybody out there that has any a passion for educating the public about suicide, I'd ask you to step forward and reach out to me or directly to Barbara, and she could definitely use some help. So hats off to the whole wellness committee. I'll send you a well with that as well. Thank you. Just to kind of piggyback on what Mrs. Smith was saying relative to sanctuary medicinals, there were some complaints about an order that was down in that neighborhood 2 weeks ago. And I think we all had gotten some communication. I think we got some kind of communication about that. I know the police chief went down, the building inspector went down. It was kind of all hands on deck. Everybody went down, the town administrator, the assistant town administrator went down just to kind of, I think they were trying to get a contact high, frankly, but no, they all went down to check it out and find out what was going on. And so I had got some calls from some of the neighbors as well, and I went down myself, walked around the neighborhood, and it was definitely, it smelled like almost like a skunk had sprayed or something like that. So it was definitely not really adept in the whole marijuana odors, but the old days. I used to go to Sox games with my dad, smell in the bathrooms. But I will say that I did stop by Sanctuary, and I know that all the town departments are working with the neighbors and working with the folks at Sanctuary to mitigate that problem. And it was in fact a problem where there was a door, the HVAC company came in to change the filters or something like that, and left one of the returns or all that air is recycled and it's all internal. All the water is recycled and reclaimed. So I know that he reached out to the neighbors and offered to bring you in and show you the operation.
I went in for 20 minutes and the smell was so strong, I couldn't stand it.
Okay. But I hope that he was able to answer any concerns you had, and I'm glad that he offered to meet some of your requests. But mostly I want to take this opportunity to say our team is very responsive, and they jumped right on it as soon as they were made aware that the town departments that could potentially impact the neighbors did jump on that. Thanks for bringing it to our attention, Margaret. That's it.
Just two things. I want to thank the police department for their outstanding open house that was held 2 weeks ago with demonstrations and whatnot. A lot of people attended that. It went off well. And I think it's the 22nd, the COA is holding a tea for Barbara Cam, who's put in a tremendous amount of time for the Council on Aging. So I think that's on the 22nd. And that's all I have.
Can I just add one thing, just building off the wellness fair? The Littleton Coalition Against Addiction was there, and they offered Narcan training, which was really great. I got my Narcan training, and it was nice to see Representative Arciero stop by, and he got his training as well, so I just wanted to give a mention
Did you get a flu
to
shot?
him. I didn't get a flu shot.
Or a flu shot's available.
I know, I didn't get a flu shot. Stopped a lot of tables, but I got my Narcan
The
training.
chairman's home sick right now.
Just saying.
Yeah, I was there like 10:15 when it first started. So. All right, moving on, Town Administrator search update.
So I guess, start with me. Obviously, first of all, we have both our staff rep, Ann Esman, who's helping the TA search committee, screening, selection task, as well as Tim, Anita, and Gary, and myself representing 4 out of 5 members of task. So quick update for the Board of Selectmen and public as to where we are in the search process, and then transition into, sort of bringing the onus back to what we need to decide today. Search process. So what we've done so far is engaged a number of professionals to understand the not just the written job description of the TA, right? We have the written job description, but what does actually being a TA mean? And we went about that by engaging Keith, but also the town manager in Chelmsford, the TA in Burlington? TA in Burlington, as well as engaging our hired consultants, Fred Ryan, who brought on Rick White to work with him and understand what that looks like. We've also engaged with all of the department heads as well as some other folks to get their feedback. One of the things that we're doing over the next several meetings, by the way, we're meeting consistently so far, at least on Wednesday nights at 6:30, though the room bounces around a little bit, so take a look at the website and the calendar on the website to figure out exactly where we might be meeting any given night. Is leaving an opportunity for members of the public, I think it's the next 3 weeks, or maybe it's the next 4 weeks, for members of the public to come in and tell us what they're looking for in the town administrator. So that at this point, what we're looking for is a total cross-section. One thing that we haven't mentioned at task, but I do want to bring up, is actually probably setting aside a time post-town meeting to actually engage the Board of Selectmen in what's the Board of Selectmen looking for in a town administrator. That would be sort of the last major constituency that we need to engage. As far as the actual process is concerned, we've put together an executive summary of what the town looks like and generally what we're looking for in the position. We've put together the formal posting. Those went out, about a week and a half ago, I suppose. The Friday before last. Have we gotten any applications yet, Ann? Do you know?
I know that we have, yes.
We have, okay, good. And the overall objective of the selection committee is first and foremost, and this actually mirrors kind of what we've heard from a lot of folks in the candidate itself, is the integrity of the process. What we want is a process that's fair and equitable for internal and external candidates. And that's part of why we hired a consultant to help us manage the process and make sure it was fair and adequately and reasonably consider all of the applicants that we do get for the process. So that posting went out about a week and a half ago. November, don't quote me on this, but November 9th is
the application deadline.
We're calling it essentially a soft application deadline. That's the point at which we will start reviewing applications. Though if something does come in after the 9th, we're not closing the door to it exclusively. The objective is for the selection committee, always mess up that S, for a task to have gone through the process of evaluating resumes and identifying our short list prior to Thanksgiving, so that shortly after Thanksgiving, we can bring in our short list of, let's say, we haven't settled on a number, it'll depend on the pool of applicants, the 10 to 12 folks that we want to interview, from which we will winnow it down to those applicants who we want to put through something akin to an assessment center process. Recall the assessment center that the police chief went through. This is not precisely that, right? There are certainly different scenarios, but a practically oriented assessment process, more rigorous than simply face-to-face interviews with folks, looking at skills like interpersonal communication, teamwork. One assessment center could be, and this is similar to what we did use in the police chief process. You have 20 minutes to prepare. Here's some facts about an incident. Go give a press conference, and we'll be there to ask questions. We haven't refined those specifically. One of our objectives was to get this off the ground and moving as quickly as it was prudent. Not any faster than that, but we also understood that we had a pretty rigorous shot clock. So what that means is that essentially December will be spent first with the interviews post-Thanksgiving, so that might be the last week of November, maybe flow into the first week of December. The assessment center process, let's say mid-December, and essentially the task, hopefully, depending on the candidates that we have, will be in a position to recommend as is our mandate, at least 2 candidates to the Board of Selectmen for the Board of Selectmen's consideration, probably our first meeting of the new year, possibly our second, but that's the general timeline of what we're looking at. Then, of course, we get into the process of hiring, and depending on the candidate, that could take, there's a background check that would be required. There may be negotiations that are required for the contract and so on. Touching on the contract for a second, one thing we did with the posting is that we were very careful not to supersede the Board of Selectmen's authority to negotiate with the candidate, particularly in regards to salary, but also other benefits. And so our posting simply says that the compensation will be based on, subject to negotiation with the Board of Selectmen and based on experience and qualifications or something of that nature. So that, what we didn't do is say, here's the salary range, because frankly, it's up to us, not to task, to make such a determination, depending on the candidate that we elect to extend an offer to. So what that does is that now brings us back to, if what we're doing is looking at potentially bringing someone on board, let's say in January or early February, depending on the negotiations and whatnot. Keith is done November 2nd and is on the payroll until January 21,
21st,
and has committed to.
And have available, in the retirement agreement that we came to, that during the period November 2nd to January 21st, I am can provide advice and assistance to the interim town administrator, so, or to the next permanent one, if hired in that window. But, so I'm part of the resources that are available for, at the call of the interim TA.
But as of November 2nd, we don't have a town administrator.
Can I jump in before we
Yep.
go on to the interim? Well, since you're speaking to the retirement agreement, Keith, I would just ask that if Keith's going to be phone a friend, we should make sure that he has the resources available to be able to be that phone a friend for us. So I don't know what the agreement states in it currently, but
Yeah, I gotta turn in all of my equipment.
so I think that's kind of silly to have him turn his equipment before January 21st if he's going to be a resource for us. So I'd love to look at an amendment to that retirement agreement so that he has the resources available to be able to help us to the highest and best of his abilities.
I don't think this board will have any problem with that.
I don't think so either. I just think it was part of an agreement, it was probably a boilerplate, and,
Right,
I mean, that does
Yeah.
that make sense to you?
yeah, it does, sure. Thank
That's
you.
something I'd like to propose,
Thanks.
just to get out there. I don't know if that's something we can take action on tonight or not. It's not on the, well, I guess this is part of the agenda, so.
Yeah, you could, you'd probably want to direct town, when you get down to the nuts and bolts of it, just to direct town council to prepare an appropriate amendment to
Okay.
allow the equipment to carry through January 21st, rather than
I think it makes
turning
sense.
it out.
Right.
Be more-
If what we want is
Well,
to extract every ounce
part-
of value out of Keith, we should give him a
Well, it'll
computer
make
to
it
do it.
easier to work remotely. I've said that I'm available, I can help cover meetings, except if, if I'm going to Nantucket, instead of going to Nantucket for a weekend at a time, it might be weeks at a time, so.
Stop rubbing it
Work
in.
remote.
Can I just ask a couple questions relative to the process?
Sure, yeah, let's touch on the process first, and then we can engage with it.
So one of the, you mentioned the soft application, so there's the deadline, but it's not really a deadline, it's a soft application.
We're gonna start evaluating applicants as of November 9th, and,
But you're gonna still have applications coming in.
I mean, if they do, I would not recommend any seriously interested candidate wait until November 15th.
That's my point. If someone can't meet a deadline, I'd almost exclude them from the process right then and there. So I would say I would advise task to harden that soft.
I would say we've already put it out there that way as part of the application, or as part of the posting. I'll give you the exact language.
I know when the police chief said that we had a cutoff date.
Right.
You kind of have to. Any application we asked for, unless we don't get any applicants, we extend it. But if we don't get any applicants by November 9th, then we can.
No one said that we couldn't consider when that application comes in. I mean, if it comes in on November 10th, maybe and it's a good one, fine.
I haven't read the posting, so I'll wait until I read the posting before I
Sure.
offer my suggestion to the task, and the task is,
If
it
I-
serves at the,
If I could offer free advice on, and I'm afraid
Get
of
what you pay
doing
for.
it, but that you need to be careful about a floating application deadline. And there's a reason why, for equal opportunity statutes and policies, that you pick a finite date and you stick with it. So if there is of a determination to extend the deadline, you should formally do that, so that any application that comes in, not just an application that you like versus one you don't like, so that if you absolutely extend the deadline to a date certain, to a later date, you can do that, but you need to do it so that any application that comes in can be considered.
Yeah,
Otherwise,
I just think it's too-
Otherwise, you get into
gray.
trouble.
And that's fine, I'm very receptive to that idea. The language we did use is with the first review of applications taking place Friday, November 9th, 2018. So
Okay.
what we haven't said is, go ahead.
The first part of that is the position is open until filled, and then it goes on.
That doesn't mean.
But I think you have to put a hard and fast date on there for applications. You're just opening it up, it's too ambiguous, I mean, it's, to Keith's point about the
Well,
EEOC.
the purpose of the policy comes because of, bad practices elsewhere, not here, where people of certain protected classes that
Didn't get a good look.
didn't get to put in an application after the fact, and others did. So you have a hard and fast.
Okay, we'll take that under advisement and figure out.
So as far as, it's been determined that so we've got Ryan Associates doing, that's the consulting firm.
That's
that we
who we've
hired.
contracted with, yes.
And they have contracted with a consultant who is Ryan Consulting, doesn't have the resources underneath Ryan Consulting other than through contract work. Someone to do an assessment, someone to do,
So they
Yeah,
subcontract?
the basis was, and here was our thought process, and certainly, I don't want you guys to be here idly, so kick me, so to speak, under the table, or just speak over me if I'm mischaracterizing it. Ryan Strategies was hired
right,
as our consultant
correct.
to support this process, and there were two reasons that we hired Ryan Strategies in the way that we did. The first is that Fred Ryan, I thought, did a good job working with us to support the police chief process.
Sure, process, yeah, sure.
The second was that, given our shot clock, this was a sum of money that we didn't have to put it out to bid. And given the good work that Fred did, we didn't want to extend this process any further
I don't disagree with you.
to, get multiple bids and go forward. We thought the price was reasonable, state law allowed us to go forward, we went forward. However, Fred specializes in the hiring process, but what he doesn't have is a connection into the
Town administrator.
town administrator community specifically. And to support him in that role, he hired Gru White as his subcontractor to
Which
assist
is
him.
fine. I mean, he's got subcontractors that
Yep.
sit on his panel for the police search. I saw her hand up in the back, I don't know. No, somebody no, I didn't want to. So my question is this, though. You mentioned an assessment center. I think it's critical for a law enforcement position. And probably, I haven't been through a fire services hire of that magnitude where we would use an assessment center if there is one. I don't know, Chief, you could probably speak to that better than I could, but is there an assessment center, is there any experience? Is there precedence to doing an assessment center for an administrator? Because any of the research that I've done, and I've looked at a dozen communities, like I started listening to them as I was sitting here, none of them did an assessment center, and some of them used Gru White. So what's involved in assessment? Is this gonna be new ground? Is it something that's gonna be just a role play? Because I don't necessarily think that if we're gonna be doing a press conference, it's in all likelihood not gonna be the town administrator, it's gonna be some chairman of the board of selectmen, typically, I think, for communities.
And that may not have been the best example to throw out there. So the short answer is yes.
It's been done.
It's been done, and other communities, as we understand it from the consultants that we've hired, both consultants, it is, I would say, not a common practice.
Okay. Because any of the communities that I researched that Drew White was hired on, as well as a number of other communities, they didn't do an assessment center for the search process.
I will tell you, one of the things that we've gotten from a lot of our department head interactions is that the skills that folks are looking for are softer skills. They're more interpersonal skills. And hiring an executive of this, we expect, at a bare minimum, we expect an interview candidate to be able to sit in front of the 5 of us and be very impressive, right? They should be clear, they should be eloquent. That's sort of like the minimum cost of entry, right? At an executive level position like this, where you're the chief administrative officer of a $50 million town. And so, in order to make sure that the Board of Selectmen had a candidate who best fits the needs of the community, we think we can get at that better through an assessment center process. And through both Ryan's strategies and through Drew White, we haven't mapped out exactly what it'll look like yet, because we're kind of only 2 weeks ahead of ourselves here in terms of planning. But we've been assured that they've got scenarios, plans, that it's been implemented in other places, and they're in a position to support us as we go through and assemble this process.
So it's not like it's a la carte, and you can't pick and choose which parts of the package you're gonna get.
I mean, I would say it is a la
I
carte.
think we're gonna have a little bit more, well, we're demanding a little bit more control. It's more of this is what's there. Even to the point, I think we've even discussed at a couple of our meetings that if we interview and we've got obvious candidates that, we've got 3 maybe that just are above and beyond everybody else, let's put them in front of the selectmen. Maybe there isn't a need for the assessment. Maybe we bite the bullet on a fee that might come with breaking the contract. But there is use, for what we're doing right now, obviously, a lot of the legwork that none of us would be able to do, meeting with all the different managers. That would have taken a lot of work.
Yeah.
We couldn't have done it. Right. So I think all of this process, I think it helps. We've all agreed on. It's just, we haven't really ironed out that piece. What, if we do need an assessment, what exactly do we want? Because, and what are we trying to get to? And that's why I think we need to meet with you all, because it might come out of the interview. So next meetings we're starting the questions, now breaking the questions down so we can get down each candidate inside an hour, right? As you know, so probably 10 to 12 questions out.
And our process for the questions and our process for the assessment center will be similar in that what we're trying to do is aggregate what the community needs, what department heads need, what the Board of Selectmen needs, and what we understand the job to actually be. Put all of those pieces together and tailor the questions and then the assessment center down the road to target those specific things, those Littleton-specific needs and wants, certainly. If we decide we don't want or have any interest in someone who's got experience with a particular skill set or a particular task, then we set that aside because no one told us that that's important to us.
Yeah, we're not completely sold, at least I'm not, I can speak for myself, I'm not completely sold that the position of town administrator, maybe is not necessarily, we're gonna draw out a scenario-based assessment center, situational, scenario-based. I don't think that's effective, me personally. So I think this is going to look a little different if we do it. It's really going to be driven to, maybe give us an example of a writing type of thing, or I don't want to get into the specifics, but.
And I will tell you that I'm a little hesitant to get into some of the, I would say the better specific, I chose the press conference example because I don't think it's a very good one. I'm hesitant to get into the ones that we think may be more valuable.
I respect that. Okay, so. I think I'm good in the process, and I think I appreciate all the work you guys put a ton of time into it, and I appreciate that. And I'm glad to hear that, Chase, you mentioned that the Board of Selectmen will have some input, because I had some concerns that, the consultant was sitting down and talking to everybody but the hiring managers, and asking them what they're looking for in the next hire, so I am happy to hear that that is part of the process, so.
Absolutely, and, of course, you guys know where, anytime.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. I appreciate that.
I guess I just presume we'd be part of the discussion. Cindy, do you have anything?
I just building on, following up with what Chuck said, I just don't see how an assessment center fits into this job search personally. I'd love to see if they have any feedback from the communities that they did provide assessment centers for a town administrator, town manager search. I can't remember if we did a survey with Ryan Associates following the assessment center for the police chief screening or anything like that. I would just be interested to see the communities that they did utilize the assessment center for, to get some feedback from them, to see what they thought about it, because I like Chuck, I couldn't find anything online about that, and I just can't visualize it, I can't just see it fitting with this search.
Well,
So
I will
just
say
like-
one example, not that we're relying on this particular idea because it's a little different, but Keith even mentioned specific hiring scenarios that he had gone through that involved essentially, and wasn't called an assessment center, but it involved, I don't need to tell
Well,
a story.
to-
Keith?
Well, just that had shared with the committee, one of the more thorough processes that I've gone through was one that the town of Lexington had set up when I was one of the finalists back when Carl Valenti was hired in 2005. They did a very, and in fact it was Tom Grew who ran that that search, and it was there were a series of exercises for each of the candidates, some that were done together, and some were done by ourselves. Each one of us faced a community forum, where it was the community meeting with just us just me as a finalist, and each of the finalists, and it was real time too.
Legitimate, it wasn't
It
an assessment center.
It wasn't an assessment center, it was the
Real
most
deal.
fundamentally assessing center, so it was the people.
That's
And
interesting.
that was very thorough. There was another one where it was a team of department heads. In fact, they took you from room to room. For an hour, you'd sit with might be the search committee, the next hour is with the senior management team, the next hour it was the community meeting. Of course, the most grueling one was lunch, where you might think you can let your hair down, but they were taking notes on that, and then it was a very thorough process.
Now, I will say, with respect to that community forum, what we had decided as a task is that if we collectively, the Board of Selectmen wanted to do that, that would be something that the Board of Selectmen decides they want to do with the finalists that the task recommends out of task. That was not part of what we were.
That particular thing was for
Right.
finalists.
But what we did, we put a lot of emphasis in Keith's sort of, it was the most rigorous process he had gone through, and we thought that was interesting and valuable.
I think that one of my viewpoints is we have 5 qualified people, you including the people that are here, that are working on this. And whether you decide later on you want to use an assessment center or something like it, then I have no problem with that. That's what we have this committee for. So it might not be called an assessment center, it might be something else, but that's what this committee was put together for. My only thing, you've already brought it up, I just want the board itself to have some input so we can say, this is what we think we're looking for.
Yeah, we apologize. That we probably should have addressed that first. You should have probably been the first people that we had the consultant at least interviews and give us the feedback from what they collected. Or we maybe even could have done that. Because
None of us doing this full-time, so.
No, right, but in the end, you are the selection, so to have an idea, it will help us create our questions. That's why we're doing it. That's why we're doing it with all the other managers in town, is to find out what they're looking for, what's important, and we, from that, and our experiences, we can draw questions, and, you know, so we're not behind by any means. I think we have another 3 weeks to do that, you know, to get our questions all in order, you know, a month.
Yeah, and do you have the selectmen and?
Yep.
And I think maybe
Yeah, I was
rather
gonna say,
than assessment center, it's more a practical exercise day.
Sure.
And
I think
maybe
that's
we're
fair.
calling it the wrong thing. And just say that it's a forum where we have just an exercise day. It's all set up what we're gonna do, and like Keith said, they all walk through it, step by step. And sometimes you can get a good feeling personality-wise of people more than you can just from an interview.
In a more casual setting, in a more casual setting,
Exactly.
yeah. Appreciate that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, I interact.
Nonetheless, Cindy, I very much take your point that reach out to some of the other
Yeah,
places that have done it.
I'd be interested.
Get
Yep.
back to you on that.
Yep, thanks.
Now onto the interim, are we all done with this?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's it. So now, part of the reason though, thank you guys very much for coming for that discussion too, because it was very helpful. Part of the reason that Task is here is because the chairman wanted both the Board of Selectmen and Task to engage simultaneously in the interim discussion. You know, we've talked about it in Task and how it could or couldn't, you know, potential selection opportunities could or could not come to bear on our selection process, but really, we essentially have 2 fundamental choices. We either use someone internal, or we use someone external as the interim.
If I could start, I think my thought on this is that if we were gonna use someone external, I think our board goofed up and didn't start this earlier. Because we're down to a time frame right now that we're within like 2 weeks of Keith not being here. We probably should have someone who has the knowledge of what's going on.
Well, maybe the chairman should assume the position in the interim. I really hope he's watching.
Oh, I can guarantee you question. But that's.
You see him getting up from his sick bed.
You come hobbling in here.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Joe.
No, but my only thought is that I think time restraint, we have someone that's working here every single day. I don't think, if we were gonna do it the proper way, we should have sent something out weeks ago to try to get 5 or 6 different applicants that would be working during that time. We didn't do that, and I think we'd be really pushing it to try to do it. And if we have someone who is currently here and knows what's going on, and if that person had a problem, the person right across there can be answering questions on the phone or whatever, so it's, and I'm just opening conversation that you might wanna jump into, so feel free.
If I could jump in before you open it up.
No. Anyone else?
It's back to you.
He's the chair. That's-
Yeah, I have to
We'll get the
respect
gavel
chair.
out if need be.
Oh, you want to go?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. I concur that. I think that we do have somebody that's sitting in the seat that is, when we interviewed for the position of assistant town administrator, you asked that question. If the town administrator went away for 6 months, I think Chairman Glavy made a comment about running off with Al Gore somewhere in Antarctica or something. But would Anthony be comfortable in that role? And it's probably sooner than we anticipated that, but last year, we had a time where Anthony had to assume the role of acting town administrator. I guess there's a difference.
On about a half-time basis during my concussion.
Right. And
The jury's still
that's,
You said that.
So that we're considering all the pros and cons, I do want to put out, I agree with the approach. I fundamentally think it makes sense. This is me speaking, not task. I think it makes sense. Anthony is the next in charge. It's in, chain of command type succession here, for the interim position. But I do want to make sure that the alternative viewpoints are heard. One of the concerns is that, the elephant in the room is that we expect Anthony to apply for the TA position, and there's the possibility that elevating the ATA to the ATA, assistant town administrator to the acting town administrator could dissuade certain applicants. And
so that's what we hired a consultant for. That's my argument to that. We hired a consultant, and that argument's been made in the town of Acton search committee. The same consulting firm said it makes it more difficult if there's an internal candidate. That's what we're hiring them for, is to make, we're hiring a consultant to do this. I think it's lazy for them to put that in. It was in his presentation to Acton, which frustrates me.
Anita?
Where I'm coming from, and it's nothing against any candidate going forward, is I think it's already well known that when anybody applies for a position, I'm just gonna use Keith's position, there are town administrators looking at coming and applying. And they're gonna assume that the assistant town administrator is going to apply. Right then and there, some town administrators or other people will not apply, just under the assumption that the assistant is gonna get the position, so why should we bother to apply? And we're trying to get have a large enough pool of as many qualified people as we can to interview, so we can bring the best 2 to 5 people to you. And it's nothing against Anthony's abilities or anything else, but if we have people already looking at that scenario, and then they see that the assistant has been put into the position of interim, is that gonna dissuade other possible qualified candidates from applying? That's a concern that I have. And that's not, the task hasn't made that decision, that's just how I feel.
If I may, Mr. Chairman.
If I could just let Tim go first.
Can I actually respond to that, though?
All right.
In 2 different places in the assistant town administrator's job description, it says that he serves as acting town administrator when designated by the town administrator or board of selectmen. In the first paragraph, delegates duties and responsibilities of the town administrator in his or her absence or unavailability. He's demonstrated that he's done that. Anybody that's not going to apply because Anthony's in that seat, whether he's interim or assistant, he's in that seat either way. And for someone not to apply because they don't think they can beat out Anthony, then shame on them. We don't want them, frankly. That's my opinion. I don't want somebody that doesn't have confidence in themselves to beat out an administrator that's been on the job for 18 months. If they feel as though they're not qualified to win the position, I don't want them applying, frankly. So that's how I respond to that.
Tim?
Well, I think as a committee, we certainly respect it. It's the board's decision to make in this matter. I agree with Anita. I think fundamentally it's not a good practice to elevate someone who's going to be a candidate for the permanent position. It does have a negative effect on recruiting. Our consultant said the same thing at our last meeting. It will have an effect because rightly or wrongly, it creates a perception that someone's got a leg up on this thing, that it might be an inside process, and we try to put the word out there that it's an open recruitment, and, we'll take all comers. And, it may be an unfair perception, but I think it exists. And, and I think in this town, I think, we have the luxury of two people that have been assistant town administrator for a number of years. And to me, there's a choice that doesn't create that recruitment issue, and there's one that does, so that's kind of where I'm coming from. But the committee honestly was split, and I don't want to put words in anyone's mouth, but there was not a consensus view of, so it's.
Can I just, that leads me to something else. Say it was a different department, say it was a police department, that the police chief had to step down and you had a deputy chief. Wouldn't you assume the deputy chief would take over while that, you go and hire? I guess I'm having a problem with the term assistant. Why do we set all this up to have an assistant when we're not going to use it?
Well, what if you had two people that had served as a deputy previously? And one definitely wanted to be the chief, and one definitely didn't. I mean, I just think that's a discussion the board ought to have. I mean, it's the board's call, we recognize that. I think, as Anita says, we want to be able to deliver the most qualified group of candidates to the Board of Selectmen to choose from, and we think it would, some of us think it would negatively affect the pool of candidates who might apply, and they might be based on wrong perceptions, but, perceptions nevertheless.
And part of that is Littleton is very lucky to be in a unique situation where you have two people that could step into the position. One we assume is applying for the position of town administrator, one who we assume is not. So you have a unique opportunity, and you have two people. And I think that you really need to think about all of those possibilities before you make a decision.
Mr. Chair, if I may. So just I did a little research on town administrator searches, available open positions for the past year, from 2017 through 2018. This is what I could find online. So I researched 7 towns, 2 of which did utilize Brew and White, is that how we pronounce it, in their candidate search. So it's interesting that they said to you that having an internal candidate would impact the candidate pool, because they assisted the town of Easton, had 55 candidates apply for their position. Their assistant town administrator was the internal candidate. They also represented the town of Hanover, had 51 applicants, while the assistant town administrator was a candidate. They also assisted the town of Shirley that had 30 that didn't have an internal candidate. So out of 11 municipalities who advertised for a town administrator manager position, between 2017 and 2018, there was a range of 28 to 55 applicants with internal candidates for 3 towns, and there was a range of 19 to 50 applicants for towns that did not have an internal candidate. So I don't see that there's any impact whatsoever on people applying for the position if there is an internal candidate in place.
Keith, do you have something?
Well,
Before we turn it back to.
Yeah, I just wanted to observe that the practice has been, for, on a department head level anyway, let me take the two most important positions in town, and the police chief and fire chief. And in both cases, when the chief position was vacant, it was filled by the second in command. And in both cases, that person did not get the job. That the candidate pool was strong enough to bring other candidates forward, and someone else got hired. And so when Steve Carter sat down as chief, we went to the number 2, Steele McCurdy, excellent candidate, landed safely in another community, but he was not promoted to permanent chief here. And we had second in command, so that's just how you know, that's what you do. So,
Mr. Goddard?
I just wanted to point out that with respect to the recruitment in Easton, I believe if you read the press reports, the consultant went on record as saying that 3 qualified candidates dropped out because there was an internal candidate. So, you know, it's.
But they still
I don't know how
received
you read it.
55 applicants for the position.
So there were 58 applicants and the only 3 that were qualified dropped out?
No, not the only 3 that were qualified. 3 very qualified candidates dropped out because they perceived that it was an inside process. That's not my opinion, that's not
So
the
just to use another example of where Grew White was used, Richard White was the consultant in Hanover, and he's quoted in the Patriot Ledger on November 14th as saying, Marino, the assistant in Hanover, will go through and, what Marino will go through until a replacement is hired is triage. He deals with the most important issues that need to be dealt with, and some of the long-term things that can be delayed will be delayed because of lack of staffing. Generally, the interims deal with what needs to be dealt with immediately, but the town doesn't necessarily engage in long-term planning and work that needs to happen behind the scenes. That's from Mr. White's mouth. So, I mean, this is the consultant that we hired, was saying the interim keeps the seat warm, I guess.
Mr. Wilson?
So I think you're hearing some of our discussion from last week when we were talking. So I think it's important that, because you're making a decision, that you hear, you know, both, I think, not both sides, but the risk, there is a risk. You know, that's kind of the case that's being brought in front of you. Now, is that risk, what is it? Is it infinitesimal? Is it larger, greater, smaller? I don't know, but I made it clear in our meeting, if I was split, you know, I was a little bit more on Chase's side with, you know, and something I'll echo what you said, Chuck, we hire a consultant partly to get the word out through email and phone call saying, no, it's not a fixed job. It is not. It's in our bylaw. It's why we're going out, why we created this board. And it's in the assistant's position description that they will act in that regard. So, I mean, that's common sense, I think, to a lot of towns. What isn't is this situation we're in, right? So, that being said, you know, coming from the HR field, and I think I trust our process enough to control that perception. We're doing things right. We hired a consultant. We're interviewing everyone fairly. We have a process. So I put it at more of a minimal risk when I look at what we're trying, you know, by having the current assistant in play, or take the interim. I've been on boards, you know, I can go speak federally, of course, on boards in the same type of situation where the deputy, the chief left or the director left, the deputy filled in some cases up to a year before the job got announced, interviewed, and didn't get the job. So I think that's just the way it is. That's a fair process. So all that being said, I think there is a risk. I take value in you know, what some of the board members said as far as you will lose somebody. It would be kind of like if Keith was making phone calls right now to a lot of town administrators and town assistants across the state. Don't apply to the job. I want Anthony to have it. I know Keith's not doing that because, you know, he's a beacon of integrity. So I'm just trying to tell you that it's more of a, if somebody is that shallow to just be that way, then you're right, Chuck, I'll echo what you said. Maybe we don't need them. But like I said, this was split. Our viewpoints were very diverse across this, and I think it's, as is yours might be, you know, on the subject.
Just move thing quick. When do we meet again?
23rd.
you have you meet with the the 23rd and the 29th. This is the last regular meeting during my tenure. But you have special meetings next Tuesday and the following Monday. I would say next Tuesday is probably the final date by which you ought to be signing any paperwork. If, for example, if you found that you could make a decision to appoint, to make a designation of an acting town administrator, then you'd want to have the paperwork associated with that, rate of pay and all that stuff, to be acted on, no later than 23rd.
I would also say there that particularly if we're talking about an internal candidate, and as we've discussed, Bonnie was the assistant for a long time before she got to be just the finance director and didn't have to juggle two jobs. And Anthony obviously is the assistant, but in either case, we would be asking both of them to essentially step up a little bit. If we were to ask Anthony to work as the interim, I would hope that Bonnie would be in a position to sort of help backfill some of those things. Now, recognizing, 2 years ago, we decided that the town administrator's office is a two-person job, and I would not expect either internal candidate, or either Bonnie or Anthony, to be able to do that job by themselves at this point. So I would also be interested in understanding, okay, Bonnie's gonna take these, Anthony's the interim, but Bonnie's gonna take the lead on these three things, and so that it would allow Anthony to, what I don't want is to lose all the momentum we have in certain town priorities. If we're invariably gonna lose some, right? We're not gonna be able to lean on Keith enough to fill that gap. But I would want to make sure that we've had input into what priorities we are going to set aside and what priorities Anthony's going to focus on and what priorities Bonnie's going to focus on while we're a little bit short-staffed in the town administrator's office. So that's something that I think over, the next week or 2 weeks, maybe by town meeting, not that you guys don't have anything to do before town meeting, but I would want to understand how that division of labor was going to work and make sure that we have the progress.
I guess, in a way, asking, should we have one more, call a meeting before what we were planning on doing, just with the chairman who's ill tonight here also, to make that choice? My biggest fear is you can't put it off until the last
Well,
second.
that's just it. I think we've each made an argument for the assistant town administrator's job description states in it that they serve as the acting town administrator. And I know it's a difference, semantics with acting versus interim. And I did speak to Paul prior to the meeting, and I think he was anticipating we were going to put this to bed tonight as well. I don't think I asked him, was there anything that you
I think we have enough input to just move forward with this tonight. I just think it's,
out of respect for Anthony, sitting right here listening to this as well.
Right.
And to Bonnie as well.
Yeah, how's that feel, Anthony?
I think we
Don't
just.
joke me.
I got it.
And Bonnie's name was brought up, and I wasn't even thinking about that. We haven't even discussed them.
To be fair, I think that's what Tim was alluding to in the sense that we,
Without naming names,
yeah, without naming names, but
Sorry, I didn't.
I'd rather just name names.
And you know what, I'm fine with whatever the board wants to do. I'm happy where I am, and it's, whatever you guys decide, it's not gonna,
And I think that we have enough respect and appreciation for the work that these two professionals do, that as far as division of labor and stuff like that, I think that they'll get the job done collaboratively.
If I could, I think the understanding would be, and that there are three people, even if one of us will be an abstention, there's Anthony and Bonnie and myself who are available to help Anthony perform the function of acting town administrator. It's been my expectation from, since 2 years ago when we went to town meeting and created the assistant, when we divided Bonnie's position into two, that someday this day would happen, and I've seen often here that people pitch in to make sure that the work gets done. And I know and I've talked to Bonnie about that, and I know that commitment's there. I'm there to offer my help too, appreciate being able to hang on to the equipment that for another month or so might help that. But that's, we're all committed to just helping to keep it together. That's the mission.
It's the choice of the board.
Okay. I'd like to move forward tonight.
I agree, to make a decision and go. And so with that in mind, I would move to, subject to negotiation with Anthony Ansaldi, move to appoint him as the acting town administrator.
Interim, I think it's
Interim?
appropriate, interim.
Which is interim town administrator, effective November 3rd, 2018.
I think the only part that we would potentially need to incorporate into that is based on bylaw, there's an interim pay scale situation in that? Do we have to include that, or just?
Well, I think that I would.
Maybe I should be asking Ann.
Yeah, I mean, this could sort of be in the category of,
Work out details later.
yeah, to work out the details, but just for, I had been coming up with some draft motions just to sort of look at, and the second one addresses the issue for me, which is to hang on to the equipment. The first one would be if you follow the practice of compensating for out-of-class work at step one of the job position, then grade 15, step one is what you would want to do. We did that. We've done that scrupulously with when people fill in.
Okay.
And we didn't have steps back in 2007, 2006, 2007, when we had a tag team, I think, of Bonnie and Dawn as the accountant and treasurer.
I remember a lot of things from that time.
Splitting those duties. So I suggest as a jumping off point, that first motion, if you want to tweak that.
Does that work for you,
Make this change.
Yeah, and I'll rescind that motion then, since it was never seconded. So, and I'll move that the Board of Selectmen vote to designate Assistant Town Administrator Anthony Ansaldi to serve as interim town administrator effective November 3rd, 2018, to be compensated at grade 15, step 1.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay.
Repeat that second motion. Move the Board of Selectmen, you okay with it?
Oh, yep, I forgot about the,
You guys have any discussion about that? Are we good with that?
Yeah, we're good.
Yeah,
Move the Board of Selectmen vote to amend Keith Bergman's retirement agreement to extend from November 2nd, 2018 to January 21st, 2019, the date for his return of town-issued property. Said amendment to be subject to approval as to form by town council.
second?
moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Thank you. And that ensures that I can be of assistance.
He was actually hoping.
Nantucket Side, we'll find you.
Well, yeah.
All right, moving on, number 6 has to do with Air Road.
Thank you guys very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate you for that.
Appreciate the input.
We'll see you guys on Wednesday.
Yes.
Except him, right? You're not
Yeah,
available?
no, I will be stressed.
Right away.
Yeah.
This is going to be just scheduling a meeting to discuss this is, on the Air Road, we have a draft 25% design plans from MassDOT, and I wanted to bring those to the meeting so that they're a part of our record. We can get them out to the public, but I think it would behoove us to actually, the information that I have from MassDOT I'm a little disappointed at the schedule, sort of the lethargic schedule that they seem to be committing to, where maybe the next public information session that they would schedule with the butters would be when the 75% design plans are arrived at.
It's a little too
in-
close to done,
in
you know, what are you
in
gonna change at the 75%?
2020 or 2019, 2020, I mean, at some distant point in the future. I would put this project as in the category of one of those ones that I'd like to help staying on top of with MassDOT and the folks there that I've been dealing with for so long, but I would think it would behoove the board to schedule its own meeting, and looking at our schedule here, November 5th is gonna be busy. I think I'd suggest the 19th, or maybe even December. I mean, there's not a particular rush to schedule this meeting, but I think it would be important to have an opportunity to notify affected property owners and to get their input on design.
But would the state be here for this one, or are you just gonna rely on our?
Well, I think that we should request the state to send someone. They could send Green International to Green is not the master of their own destiny, that they need state permission to show up at hearings, so if they're directed to, they will, and I think it's reasonable for us to have Green come and explain these plans to a meeting. It's.
Well, I mean, if for some reason the state was not willing to, who knows? Are we in a position where we could do what we can to explain to the public, synthesize it in it, at a minimum, summarize the public comment and send a letter to MassDOT?
Yes, we can certainly do that. I guess that the only thing that I'm trying to frame here is that how we do that, the board should be in agreement on and direct. I don't want it to be just a staff-led thing that's meeting with the, I know that the board is interested in this project, so whether it's scheduling an agenda item for one of your regular meetings, or to have some other kind of event set up, maybe on a different night, maybe that's a better use of people's time. For example, if this were to be on an agenda on any regular meeting, and we pick a time for it, I'd hate to have people waiting for 90 minutes because other things ran open. Maybe you want to set up another day for another time. But I do think it's important that something be put in place to have this draft plan get out to the community and to have us provide and get their input so that we can then feed it back to MassDOT. I think that's a vital role that the town officials can be playing.
I think the thing we don't wanna do is to schedule a regular meeting night for the very reason you said.
Yeah.
And if you schedule it early and it's the only item and it takes an hour and a half, 2 hours, it's different than being here at 11 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
So do we wanna try to schedule it for a special date?
I suppose what you could also do, if you, I mean, you could pick a date, I have to say at this point, just might be an arbitrary date, or you could just say that you vote to schedule a public meeting at a date to be determined, and then we'll work it out later.
Yep, that'd be best.
That way we get the signal to, for a date and time to be determined, because the other thing is we want to see when can we get MassDOT and or Green International.
Sure, if they give us a date that they want it,
Right.
fine.
So I think that would be the key. So if we just say, for a date and time to be determined, that will get us moving to schedule that meeting, and there would be a special meeting.
That makes sense, sure. Motion?
Please.
Move that the Board of Selectmen vote to schedule a public meeting for a date and time to be determined to review Mass DOT's draft 25% design plans for the Air Road, Route 2A, 110, Bruce Street, Willow Street intersection improvements.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion further? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Carries. Housing Choice Communities Capital Grant, 7A.
Yep, this is by way of update, that plenty of tweeting going on, that the town, last Thursday was awarded a grant for $250,000 under the Housing Choice Program. The full group photo is shown in the insert on the left, and it just so happened that Littleton got right in the center. with the-
Yeah.
That's shocking.
That never happens.
You taking lessons, Anthony?
We arrived early, we picked our seats carefully.
Hey, I thought we did a good job chasing down Secretary Bean.
Right, we did.
That was
We
a
were
good
in the front too.
Yeah, right?
So,
That's
Guys,
a
tabletop?
shot.
We chased Secretary Bean right out of the building. Hey, wait, we stopped the guy in the middle of the street. We thought Keith would be very proud.
so it was great. And so, just to report back that the grant, which was, our grant application rated very high. It was for self-contained breathing apparatus equipment for the fire department. And because it would bring us into compliance with a code, that scored very highly, that they were impressed that there was a need that we could identify, that the need was high, it scored very high. And also because they looked at what the community's record was with addressing housing production. And we had over 10% that had qualified us under the program. So I was very glad that we could be in the first group to get grants, and just wanted to report that back. The next item is an update. We've tried a couple of times to talk about the Community Compact Cabinet program. This still might be in the category of something that I think you need to think about. There are 3 grant programs that are available, the best practices, an IT grant, and a regionalization and regional and efficiency grant. As it happens, the window for the IT grant already passed, but we caught it, that town of Acton was putting together a regional grant application for IT, for doing a flyover for GIS. That's the only one that's offered, this round was the only one that's offered this year for IT, and we were able to jump in on that with, as I had shared with the board at the time, that we discussed it right before the grant application deadline. So there's
And do I
not,
understand this correctly, that it would be worth $15,000 or $16,000 to Littleton, or that would be our?
well, I'm trying to recall what
Prorated value?
I thought the figure was higher, I thought the value was higher, 26,000 or something, I think, might have been, but I didn't bring a copy
Okay.
of that.
But on that order, it's several
Yeah.
tens of thousands of dollars.
And Nancy Glencross and Chris Sutter were both very enthusiastic about taking advantage of that grant, of that, jumping in on the joint grant application that Acton was doing. The so-called efficiency and regionalization grant would be another opportunity to do. It does need to, it scores highest if you do it in connection with some other communities. Crosstown Connect has gone after that grant category several times with some success. In recent years, one year I think we did it, the towns in the Magic Subregion got a grant for stormwater as a group, so that can be looked at. The main opportunity though, and this is just as I scroll through here, yep, okay. Who was that? That was yet another picture of here's the 5 Crosstown Connect communities with our signing ceremony back in 2015.
Were you guys in that one?
Huh?
Were you guys in that one? Front and center.
Where is it?
East side.
No, no. There.
Oh, there you
go. Yeah, right in the center. And even got to MC that event, so. Yeah, and I thought I had a slide in here for, maybe it's in your packet, but the biggest opportunity, the best practices program, that's the biggest opportunity for Littleton to figure out what its needs are and then how you can go after a grant. Because it's a finite list, but it's a very long list of things that you can do as best practices. And it would be worth going through that list, taking a look at what that list offers, and if there are particular things we can parlay to go for our own community compact again. We are eligible to sign another community compact with the administration. We haven't signed one since 2015. We've been living on the original one, but it would be worth looking at that list, having the board consider that list, and at first I thought we might want to do something with the smart sewer, but it didn't actually fit neatly into any of the categories, so instead we figured we're just going, we're going for the big money that far exceeds what you could get in this best practices program. But I think it'd be an opportunity to look at how other needs can be met.
Could I make a suggestion here perhaps with this? I'll tell you, I probably don't personally have the bandwidth to go through and sort this out. Do you think it makes sense for us to take a page out of the school committee's playbook and appoint a two-person subcommittee to look at this and make a recommendation to the five of us? That way there's some back and forth and some deeper evaluation that two people are going into without all five of us showing up with completely wide disparate priorities. I'm happy to be told no, I just
No,
have to
I think it makes sense.
kick it around a little bit.
that makes sense.
I'll do it.
Cindy, I'll jump over it, just to have two of us. I'm
Yeah.
down with you.
Yeah, that would be
If
great.
If we could get together with Keith,
That-
before the famous final scene.
Yep, and even after that,
November 2nd, at
Yeah.
11 o'clock at night. Like,
What are you
after
doing
that,
at
buy
4
me-
o'clock on the
yeah,
second?
buy me a cup of coffee. It might be at the Concord Starbucks rather than Littleton, but maybe we'll meet in Acton, so. Yeah, I think that would be very helpful to set up, so selectmen.
Good idea.
That's a good
He's like a
idea.
blind squirrel.
Notice how I
Delegate.
took no responsibility for anything.
Yeah.
Good move.
Yeah,
Good
right,
move.
see,
Good
Joe,
move.
yeah. Actually, just taking a page out of Joe's playbook here. I really marveled last town meeting at his ability to not have to present a single article. That
Elder
was,
statesman.
that was some
Got it.
beautiful statesmanship work right
I
there.
actually took that as someone else's playbook, but I went to, I watched somebody do that in the past and go, yeah, but, yeah, I'll take that.
You picked some, not the strongest horses. Still one.
That's great.
I wonder.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, so that's that. I'll take care of that. Next, we've got three union contracts, consolidated collective bargaining agreements to sign. We have the documents for highway, dispatch, and police unions. All three of those, you signed the MOUs back in the spring. The May town meeting funded the first year of those contracts so that they're all in place. And now we're following the practice of pulling those MOUs and creating a consolidated document so that people don't have to flip to several years' worth of agreements. These have been all signed by the unions. They were prepared by Labor Council, Darren Klein, in consultation with the HR and the police and highway departments. So they are ready for your signature. And there's three separate motions to go through. First one is highway.
You want me to go?
Yeah, you can go.
Move the Board of Selectmen vote to execute a consolidated collective bargaining agreement, CBA, with the AFSCME Council 93 Local 1703 Highway Union, which contains all the provisions of the 2015 to 18 CBA as modified by the 2018-2021 memorandum of agreement ratified on April 9th, 2018, and approved by the May 7th, 2018 annual town meeting.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, that's 7C2.
There's dispatch.
I'll go, want to just,
Yeah, sure. Move the
Contract?
Board of Selectmen vote to execute a consolidated collective bargaining agreement, CBA, with the Massachusetts Coalition of Police, Local 204A, which contains all the provisions of the 2015-2018 CBA as modified by the 2018-21 Memorandum of Agreement ratified May 3rd, 2018, and approved by the May 7th, 2018 annual town meeting.
second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Move the Board
7C3.
of Selectmen vote to execute a consolidated collective bargaining agreement, CBA, with the Massachusetts Coalition of Police, Local 204, which contains all the provisions of the 2015-2018 CBA as modified by 2018 to 2021 Memorandum of Agreement ratified May 3rd, 2018, and approved by the May 7th, 2018 annual town meeting.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Thank you.
Wait a second, 204A is iron, that's not 204A is the dispatch.
On the minutes. Which I don't have in front of me.
Onto minutes.
No, I've read it, I just read it.
Just have it in front of you?
Yeah. Has everyone had a chance to read those minutes?
Said Paul Lady a lot, so I think we're okay.
Ready?
Sure.
Move that the Board of Selectmen vote to approve the meeting minutes of September 24th, 2018.
Second.
Motion been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Nice eye.
Aye, aye, aye.
I'm an eye on the minutes.
Okay, I guess we're all set for executive session. Before we do that, until Keith, you mentioned it a second ago that this is your last regular meeting, I want to take the opportunity, since it's the last regular meeting, to thoroughly thank you for the work that you put in and done for this town for the last 11 years. I've been here the full time, and I don't know that I've met someone who's that professional all the time. Sometimes it's hard to read you, but that's not a bad thing. But from where I think we were 10 years ago, and all the accomplishments that has been made by this board with your hard work, it's just amazing. And I'm just happy as a selectman's been here that long to be able to have worked side by side, and sometimes we haven't agreed, but honest to God, it's been a tremendous pleasure.
Thank you very much. For me too. It's been, I said before, the best gig of my career. And I had not I had only recently gone through the records to see where I'm the longest serving town administrator in Littleton, 11 years. Number two is Tim Goddard, who was here for 9 years. Actually, Mark Haddad was here for 9 years. But so that, for me, now that's 2 towns where I'm the longest, in Massachusetts, where I'm the longest serving. The Provincetown was 17 years. So, and it's great to be able to be someplace for that long, and to feel like we've been able to make the contribution, and there's just so much that we can all be proud of for the things that we got to do together, and I'm just grateful for the opportunity. And I told the staff they brought 2 cakes in at the staff meeting last week, and I said, I'm having well, because the cakes were just sort of medium-sized, and there were a lot of people. But I had, as
Part of the Wellness Committee.
as they were, yeah. So as they were bringing, portion control. So as they were bringing the cakes in, I was having deja vu, because identical twin brother, and my mother always brought 2 cakes, one for each of us, and so
That's a
I
nice
guess,
little
so that was a
hidden-
little, that was a throwback Tuesday for
That's a cool message.
that. So, but it's, you know, and what I said to them is that one of the things I loved about Littleton, even though there's a lot of separately elected departments, and there's a lot of separate, not everyone reports, it's not a pyramid structure where everyone is reporting to a central administration, which reports to selectmen. There's lots of other elected boards, and everyone has separate authority. But that never, ever stands in the way of everyone pitching in to do what's in the town's best interest, which happens all the time, every day here, and it's really great to see.
So instead of a pyramid, we're more like a treehouse that we used to build in our backyards. and
Yeah, well, yeah.
Branches going all over.
Yeah, it
the
was
place.
actually, it's more like, you know, because so many report, not only selectmen, but all the separately elected groups report directly to the voters. It can be a challenge sometimes, but everyone pitches in.
Can be challenged.
Starts at the top.
Do you remember what it was like when you first came, though, and to talk about flat government? No one reported to anybody. and
Yeah, it took a long time.
Doors
Yeah,
closed
yeah.
when they wanted to and opened,
Yeah.
and no one had a say, and
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for allowing me
Thank you,
to
it's
be
been a
here.
pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wish you the best.
we're going into executive session, but I don't have the motion.
Do you have this?
Oh,
I do.
Hold on,
Hold on. Yeah, I did too. Cindy's got it in front of her.
I gotta find it on my,
it's on the screen now.
well, I'm not making it.
Yeah, I know.
Do you want to read it,
Yeah, just
Joe, or
put
you
it
want
up.
me to read it?
Well, please
I
read
just
it.
put it up on the big screen.
Move that the Board of Selectmen vote pursuant to Mass General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 21A2, to go into executive session to strategy with respect to contract negotiations with non-union personnel, and not to convene an open session thereafter.
Second.
Roll call vote, Ms. Napoli,
Aye.
Mr. Chase,
Aye.
you,
Aye?
and me.
You.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. We do have a joint meeting next Tuesday, the 23rd, with FinCom and School Committee. So, public service.